I always imagined my wedding day would be perfect. The delicate scent of white roses filling the air, soft piano music echoing through the church, and my father's proud smile as he walked me down the aisle toward the man who promised to love me forever. Instead, I found myself alone in the bridal suite, mascara streaking down my cheeks, staring at the 3-word text message that had shattered my world. I can't. Sorry, that was it. 5 years together, 18 months of engagement, and 12 weeks of intense wedding planning, all dismissed with 3 pathetic words and a period. No explanation, no goodbye, just I can't. Sorry. As if he were canceling a dinner reservation, not abandoning me on what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. I don't know how long I sat there, phone clutched in my trembling hands, wedding dress pooling around me like a deflated dream. Minutes? Hours? Time seemed to bend and stretch in bizarre ways. The occasional knock at the door, my maid of honor Layla, my mother, the wedding planner, all went unanswered until their concerned voices faded into a distant hum. Emma? Honey, please open the door. My mother's voice cracked with worry. Whatever's happened, we can fix it together. Fix it? How could anyone fix this? The church was filled with 200 guests. The reception venue was decorated. The 5-tier cake with hand-painted sugar flowers that had cost more than my first car was being delivered. And the groom, my James, my steady, reliable, supposedly devoted James, was gone. I finally unlocked the door when my father threatened to break it down. One look at my face told them everything. He's not coming, I whispered, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. James isn't coming. What followed was chaos disguised as crisis management. My father, always the executive, took charge with terrifying efficiency. My mother enveloped me in a protective embrace while shooting rapid-fire instructions to the wedding planner. My 3 bridesmaids formed a human shield, keeping well-meaning relatives at bay while someone, I don't remember who, worked on removing my wedding dress before I could rip it to shreds with my bare hands. The guests had to be told. The vendors had to be informed. Someone needed to go to our apartment and pack my things. 1,000 details that suddenly felt both overwhelmingly important and completely meaningless. Did he say why? Layla asked, her voice gentle as she helped me into the emergency clothes she'd retrieved from my overnight bag. I could only shake my head. There had been no warning signs, at least none that I'd recognized. James had been his usual self right up until the rehearsal dinner the night before, kissing me sweetly before we parted ways for our last night apart. Had he already known then? Had he smiled at me, accepted congratulations from our friends and family, all while planning his escape? His brother's looking for him, someone said. I think it was my cousin Rachel. Daniel's furious. He's calling everyone they know. Daniel, James's older brother, best man, the responsible one of the 2 brothers, always cleaning up James's messes, though this was beyond anything that could be tidied away with a few apologetic phone calls. I remember very little of leaving the church. My memory morphs from disconnected snapshots, my mother's hand tight around mine, someone throwing a coat over my shoulders to shield me from the guests' stares, the weight of my engagement ring suddenly unbearable on my finger, to complete darkness. I spent the next 3 days in my childhood bedroom, blinds drawn, door locked, existing in a fog of grief and humiliation. On day 4, Daniel came to see me. I hadn't wanted visitors. My phone remained off. My parents had become gatekeepers, filtering concerned friends and turning away reporters seeking the juicy details of my public humiliation. But when my mother softly announced that Daniel was downstairs, something inside me shifted. "Send him up," I said, my voice hoarse from crying and disuse. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror as I waited. Puffy eyes, unwashed hair, wearing the same oversized t-shirt I'd been living in for days. I didn't care. Daniel had seen me at my absolute worst before, usually when I was sick and James was hopeless at caretaking. Daniel would bring soup and medicine while James hovered awkwardly in the background. Always reliable, always there. "Hey," he said simply when my mother ushered him in. No platitudes, no false cheerfulness, just acknowledgement. Daniel looked nearly as bad as I did. The tailored suit and polished demeanor of the best man had been replaced by rumpled jeans and a wrinkled button-down. His dark hair stuck up in places, and the shadows beneath his eyes suggested he hadn't been sleeping much better than I had. "Have you found him?" I asked, my first words directed at someone other than my parents in days. Daniel shook his head, sinking into the chair by my desk. "No, his credit cards haven't been used. His phone goes straight to voicemail. He took some cash from his account the day before that day, but not enough to go far. He paused. I'm sorry, Emma. I don't know what the hell he was thinking. I laughed then, a horrible sound without any humor. That makes two of us. Daniel pulled something from his pocket and placed it on my nightstand, a small white envelope. What's that? I asked, not reaching for it. Your wedding gift from me. His jaw tightened. I was going to give it to you both at the reception, but the groom decided not to show. I finished for him. You should return it, whatever it is. I can't. Daniel met my eyes directly. It's non-refundable. Daniel, I don't need... It's the honeymoon package. He interrupted. 2 weeks at that overwater bungalow resort in the Maldives that you've been dreaming about. Flight vouchers included. Something sharp twisted in my chest. The honeymoon. In all the chaos, I'd completely forgotten. James and I were supposed to leave the day after the wedding, yesterday actually, for 2 weeks of paradise. Another dream turned to ash. Well, that's a waste, I muttered, fighting back a fresh wave of tears. Daniel leaned forward, his expression intense. It doesn't have to be. What? The reservations are in your maiden name. The flight vouchers can be changed. He paused. You should still go. I stared at him, certain I'd misheard. Are you insane? Go on my honeymoon alone? Not alone. Daniel held my gaze, and something in his expression made my breath catch. I'll go with you. The silence that followed was deafening. I searched his face for signs that he was joking, but found none. Only determination, anger, and something else I couldn't quite identify. You want to go on my honeymoon with me? I repeated, testing the words. Your brother's honeymoon? My brother, Daniel said with quiet fury, forfeited his right to any consideration when he humiliated you in front of everyone you care about and then disappeared like a coward. He took a deep breath. Look, Emma, you've been planning this trip for months. You deserve to go somewhere beautiful and heal. And I need to do something besides sit around feeling useless and angry. Why? I asked, genuinely confused. This isn't your mess to fix, Daniel. His expression softened. Because you're family, Emma. You have been since long before that ring went on your finger. And family doesn't abandon each other. I looked away, emotions tangling inside me. Grief, gratitude, lingering humiliation, and something that felt dangerously like the first spark of purpose I'd had in days. It would be weird, I said finally. Probably, he acknowledged, but less weird than wasting 2 weeks in paradise that are already paid for. My parents would lose their minds. Your dad already approved the idea. I raised my eyebrows at that. You asked my father's permission to take me on my honeymoon? A hint of a smile touched Daniel's lips. I ran the idea by him, yes. He thinks it might be good for you to get away from everyone's pity. I considered this. My father had always liked Daniel, often commenting that he seemed more grounded than his younger brother. In our 5 years together, James had changed jobs 3 times, while Daniel had steadily built his architectural firm from the ground up. My father respected that kind of stability. When would we leave? I asked, surprising myself with the question. The vouchers are flexible. Next week? Give you time to process a bit more. I looked down at my hands, at the pale band of skin where my engagement ring had been until I'd hurled it across the room in a fit of rage the previous night. People would talk, I said quietly. Daniel's expression hardened. Let them. They're already talking, Emma. At least this way they'll have something new to discuss besides how you were left at the altar. His bluntness stung, but he wasn't wrong. The wedding had been large enough that news of the disaster had spread well beyond our immediate circle. I'd seen the sympathetic Facebook messages before turning off my phone. The thought of facing all those pitying looks made me physically ill. Besides, Daniel continued more gently, you'll be halfway around the world. You won't have to hear any of it. I studied him, trying to understand his motivation. Daniel and I had always gotten along well, but we weren't exactly close friends independent of James. We were future in-laws who shared meals at holidays and helped each other move furniture. He was the person I called when James forgot his phone somewhere or needed a ride home after having too many beers with his college buddies. Dependable, kind, but peripheral to my daily life. Why are you doing this, really? I asked finally. Daniel ran a hand through his already disheveled hair. Because I'm furious with my brother for what he did to you. Because I was the one who introduced you to, and I feel responsible. Because you deserve better than to hide away in this room while he gets away with... He trailed off, visibly trying to rein in his anger. And you think 2 weeks in the Maldives will fix all that? I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. No, he said quietly. But it might be a start. For both of us. I glanced at the envelope on my nightstand. 2 weeks away from the whispers, the sympathy, the endless questions I couldn't answer. 2 weeks to breathe, to think, to begin processing the nuclear bomb that had detonated in the center of my carefully planned life. "I'll think about it," I said finally. Daniel nodded, seeming to understand it was the most commitment I could offer in that moment. He stood to leave, pausing at the door. "For what it's worth, Emma, my brother is an idiot. And someday, when the shock wears off, you're going to realize this was the luckiest escape of your life." After he left, I sat on my bed staring at the envelope for a long time. Inside were vouchers representing the honeymoon I'd spent months planning with the man who couldn't even face me to say goodbye. The trip was supposed to be our first adventure as husband and wife, 2 weeks of uninterrupted bliss before returning to real life with our shiny new titles and matching rings. Now it represented something else entirely, a bizarre proposition from my almost brother-in-law that somehow managed to be both wildly inappropriate and oddly tempting. Going anywhere right now seemed impossible. Getting on a plane to an isolated island resort with Daniel seemed insane. And yet, something about the idea planted a tiny seed in the barren wasteland of my emotions. Not happiness exactly, not even hope, but perhaps purpose. A direction to move in besides endless circular grief. I picked up the envelope and opened it. Inside were the vouchers, just as Daniel had said, along with a glossy brochure showing impossibly blue water and luxury bungalows perched on stilts above a pristine lagoon. James and I had pored over these images for hours, planning our days, which excursions we'd take, which restaurants we'd try, which sunrise we'd watch from our private deck. A different image began forming in my mind, James returning from wherever he'd fled, perhaps contrite, perhaps ready to explain, only to discover I wasn't waiting tearfully for his return, that I'd taken our honeymoon without him, with his brother no less. For the first time in days, I felt something other than devastation. It was small, this new feeling, fragile, but undeniably present. It felt like the first faint stirring of revenge. 5 days later, I boarded a plane to paradise with my almost brother-in-law. My parents drove us to the airport, my mother fussing over my luggage as if I were leaving for college rather than a luxury resort. "You're sure about this?" she whispered while Daniel loaded our suitcases into the check-in queue. "No," I admitted. "But I'm sure I can't stay here another day with everyone walking on eggshells around me." She squeezed my hand. "Call us." "Every day. The time difference. I don't care if it's 3 a.m., Emma. Call us." I promised I would, though we both knew international calls from the Maldives would cost a fortune. My father had been strangely quiet throughout the morning, but as we approached security, he pulled me into a tight hug. "I'm proud of you," he said gruffly. "Taking back your power like this." I wasn't sure that's what I was doing, but I didn't correct him. The truth was messier, my motivations a tangled knot of grief, anger, and a desperate need to feel something, anything, besides the humiliation that had become my constant companion. Daniel kept a respectful distance during these goodbyes, his attention politely focused on his phone. He'd been like that throughout our hasty preparations, present but unobtrusive, handling logistics while giving me space to change my mind at any point. I hadn't, though the surreality of the situation hit me in waves. I was going on my honeymoon with my runaway groom's brother. "What kind of person does that?" "A desperate one," whispered a voice in my head. A pathetic, jilted woman so broken she'd grasp at any escape. I pushed the thought away as we cleared security and made our way to the gate. This wasn't desperation. This was recovery, or the beginning of it anyway. "Second thoughts?" Daniel asked quietly as we settled into the uncomfortable airport chairs to wait for boarding. "About 17th thoughts, actually," I replied with a weak attempt at humor. "But I'm still here." He nodded, understanding flashing in his eyes. "One day at a time? We can turn around at any point." That was part of what had finally convinced me to go through with this madness, Daniel's complete lack of pressure. The tickets were changeable. The resort had been informed of the change in circumstances and had assured us that while the honeymoon package had been paid for, we could be relocated to separate accommodations upon arrival if preferred. "One step at a time," I echoed. The first leg of our journey passed in relative silence. I dozed fitfully, waking often to the disorienting realization that the wrong brother sat beside me. Daniel read a novel, occasionally checking if I needed anything but otherwise respecting my need for quiet. It wasn't until our layover in Dubai, bleary-eyed from crossing multiple time zones, that the conversation turned to the elephant we'd been carefully avoiding. Have you heard from him? I asked as we picked at overpriced airport sandwiches. Daniel's expression tightened. No, though not for lack of trying on my part. Me neither. I stared down at my barely touched food. Do you think he's okay? The question had been haunting me despite my anger. What if something had happened to James? What if he hadn't run away but had been in an accident? Or worse. He's fine, Daniel said with surprising certainty. His passport was used 2 days ago. He left the country. My head snapped up. What? How do you know that? Daniel had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I have a friend in border security. I was worried too, so I asked her to check. Where did he go? Mexico. The word hit me like a physical blow. Mexico, where James and I had first met, at a destination wedding for our mutual friends 5 years ago, where he'd first kissed me under a string of lights on a beach, tasting of lime and tequila, a place that had been special to us. Alone? I managed to ask. Daniel hesitated, and in that brief pause I knew. He's with someone, I whispered. The passport check just shows him, but Daniel sighed heavily. There have been rumors. Nothing concrete until now. What rumors? From who? My voice had taken on a strange, distant quality, as if someone else were speaking through me. Emma, tell me, Daniel. I deserve to know. He set down his coffee. A couple of his friends hinted that he'd been seeing someone from work. I didn't want to tell you because it was just gossip, and he trailed off. And you didn't want to hurt me more than I was already hurting. I finished for him. The pieces were clicking into horrible place. James's recent late nights at the office, the way he'd been protective of his phone, his reluctance to finalize certain wedding details. How long? I don't know for sure. Guess. Daniel met my eyes directly. Based on what I've heard? At least 3 months. 3 months. A quarter of our engagement. While I'd been choosing floral arrangements and addressing invitations, he'd been, what? Planning his exit? Stringing me along until he gathered the courage to leave? Or had he actually intended to go through with the wedding until some final attack of conscience? A strange, cold calm settled over me. So he left me for her. I think so, yes. I nodded, processing this new information with detached analysis that belied the storm raging inside me. Who is she? Do you know her name? Emma, does it matter? Yes. My voice was steel. It matters to me. Daniel hesitated, then relented. Sylvia Chen. She's a new associate at his firm. That's all I know. Sylvia Chen. I committed the name to memory, though I wasn't yet sure what I intended to do with it. For now, it was enough to have a name. A face for the vague shadow who had helped destroy my life. Thank you for telling me, I said finally. I'm sorry. Don't be. I needed to know. I straightened my shoulders. At least now I understand why we're here. Daniel raised an eyebrow. Why's that? Because while my fiancé is fucking his new girlfriend in Mexico, I'll be enjoying the honeymoon he paid for with his brother. I smiled, and for the first time in days it felt genuine, if slightly brittle around the edges. It's almost poetic when you think about it. Something shifted in Daniel's expression. Surprise, certainly, but also a glimmer of admiration. You're tougher than he gave you credit for. I'm tougher than I gave myself credit for, I corrected. And I'm not done yet. As we boarded our connecting flight, a new determination took root within me. This trip was no longer just an escape. It was the first step in reclaiming my life, my dignity, and just maybe, extracting a measure of justice from the man who'd thought so little of me that he couldn't even face me to say goodbye. James might have left me at the altar, but I was done playing the role of abandoned bride. He'd taken enough from me. My trust, my plans, my confidence. He wouldn't take this too. This trip was mine now. And if it happened to hurt him when he discovered I'd gone on our honeymoon with his brother, well, that was just a bonus. The Maldives truly was paradise. That was my first coherent thought as our seaplane descended toward the tiny island resort, surrounded by water so turquoise it seemed artificially colored. After nearly 24 hours of travel, I'd expected to feel nothing but exhaustion, but the view from the window temporarily pushed aside all other emotions. Wow! I breathed, pressing my face to the glass like a child. Beside me, Daniel smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen from him since this strange journey began. Worth the trip already? I nodded, momentarily speechless. Below us, overwater bungalows extended from the island in a pattern resembling a palm frond, each luxurious suite connected to land by wooden walkways. White sand beaches circled the lush green interior. It was exactly as pictured in the brochures I'd pored over, yet somehow more vibrant, more real. The landing was smoother than I'd expected, the small aircraft settling onto the water with barely a splash. As we taxied toward the welcome dock, I caught my first glimpse of the resort staff, lined up in pristine white uniforms, ready to greet new arrivals. Reality crashed back with nauseating force. They were expecting honeymooners. They were expecting a bride and groom, a newly married couple ready to begin their life together in the most romantic setting imaginable. Not whatever Daniel and I were. "Daniel," I whispered urgently as the plane docked. "They think It's taken care of," he assured me. "I spoke with the manager yesterday. They know the situation." Relief flooded through me, quickly followed by a fresh wave of humiliation. How many people had Daniel had to explain our bizarre circumstances to? How many pitying looks had he endured on my behalf? As if reading my thoughts, he added, "I told them you were my best friend who'd been stood up by her fiancé, and that we decided the trip shouldn't go to waste. That's all they need to know." Best friend. It wasn't accurate, but it was certainly easier to explain than the truth. I nodded gratefully as the cabin door opened and warm, fragrant air rushed in. The resort staff greeted us with professional warmth, no hint of curiosity or judgment in their expressions. Cool towels and fruit juice were pressed into our hands as a young woman who introduced herself as Amira explained she would be our personal concierge during our stay. "We've prepared the Sunset Water Villa as requested," she told Daniel, "though we've modified the honeymoon amenities as per your instructions." I shot Daniel a questioning look, but he just nodded. "Thank you, that's perfect." We were escorted along wooden walkways to the far end of the resort, passing one luxurious overwater bungalow after another. Each had a private deck with steps leading directly into the lagoon, outdoor showers hidden by tropical foliage, and uninterrupted views of the horizon. The Sunset Water Villa turned out to be the most private accommodation, situated at the very end of the walkway with only the vast Indian Ocean beyond it. Amira swept open the doors with a flourish, revealing a space so beautiful it momentarily took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the panoramic ocean view. A living area with plush sofas faced a deck with an infinity plunge pool that seemed to merge with the sea beyond. A dining table was set for two, adorned with fresh flowers but noticeably lacking champagne or any other romantic touches. Through an archway, I glimpsed the bedroom with its massive king bed draped in gauzy white curtains. "One bedroom, one bed." I froze, panic rising in my throat. "And the second bedroom is through here," Amira continued smoothly, leading us to what I'd assumed was a closet door. It opened to reveal a smaller but equally lovely room with a queen bed, its own bathroom, and doors leading to a section of the shared deck. The tension drained from my shoulders. Daniel had thought of everything. "Is this arrangement satisfactory?" Amira asked, looking between us. "It's perfect," I managed to say. "Thank you." After a brief tour of the villa's features, the Bluetooth sound system, the fully stocked refrigerator, the tablet that could be used to order room service or book experiences, Amira left us with a gentle reminder that she was available 24/7 for any requests. As the door closed behind her, an awkward silence filled the space. We stood in the center of the luxurious living room, surrounded by paradise, suddenly very aware that we were alone together for the first time since this strange journey began. "You should take the master bedroom," Daniel said, breaking the silence. "I'll take the smaller one." "Are you sure? This was supposed to be your gift to us, to James and me. You should have the nicer room." He shook his head firmly. "I'm sure. Besides, the master bath has that huge soaking tub you were excited about." I'd forgotten that detail, how I'd gushed to them both about the freestanding tub with the ocean view after seeing it in the brochure. The fact that Daniel remembered made my throat tighten unexpectedly. "Thank you," I said, unable to articulate all I was thanking him for. The room, the thoughtful arrangements, the way he'd somehow navigated this impossible situation with compassion and foresight. "We should probably unpack, get settled," he suggested. "Maybe rest a bit before dinner? The time change is brutal." I nodded, grateful for the direction. We retreated to our respective rooms, the strange tension dissipating as we fell into the practical tasks of unpacking and freshening up after the long journey. In the privacy of the master suite, I sat on the edge of the enormous bed, running my hands over the silky sheets that should have been my marriage bed. Tears threatened, but I blinked them back ruthlessly. I would not cry here in this beautiful place. I had done enough crying for James. Instead, I unpacked methodically, hanging the sundresses and swimsuits I'd packed for my honeymoon in the spacious closet. I'd bought so many new things for this trip: bright, colorful pieces meant to be admired by a husband, romantic, wispy dresses for candlelit dinners, lingerie that would now go unworn. Well, not the lingerie. I'd left those items behind, unable to bear the sight of them. But everything else I'd brought, determined to use this trip exactly as intended, as an escape, a fresh start, a chance to heal in beautiful surroundings. I showered in the luxurious outdoor shower, hidden from view by strategic walls and lush plants but open to the sky above. The hot water sluiced away the travel grime, and I took my time with the expensive resort toiletries, breathing in their coconut and vanilla scents. By the time I emerged, wrapped in a plush robe, I felt more human than I had in days. I dressed in a simple sundress, applied minimal makeup, and stepped out to the shared living area. Daniel was already there, freshly showered and changed into linen shorts and a casual button-down shirt, standing on the deck with his back to me. I allowed myself a moment to observe him. In the golden late-afternoon light, with the breeze ruffling his dark hair, he looked relaxed for the first time since he'd appeared at my parents' house with his strange proposition. The sight stirred something unexpected in me. Not attraction exactly, but a sudden awareness that I knew very little about Daniel as an individual, separate from his role as James's brother or my almost brother-in-law. Who was this man who had brought me to paradise? What was he thinking, feeling, expecting from this bizarre situation? "The view is incredible," I said, stepping onto the deck beside him. He turned, smiling. "It really is. How are you feeling? Ready to venture out for dinner, or would you prefer room service tonight?" The question was asked without pressure, just another example of how carefully he was navigating my fragile state. "I think I'd like to go out," I decided. "See more of the resort. Unless you're too tired? I'm good. Hungry, though." We consulted the resort map and decided on the beachfront restaurant, the most casual of the dining options. As we walked along the wooden walkways, now lit with gentle lanterns as dusk settled, I was acutely aware of how couple-like we must appear to observers. The thought made me nervous, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly why. The restaurant was open air, tables set directly on the sand beneath swaying palm trees strung with fairy lights. Most tables were occupied by obvious couples, holding hands across the table, speaking in intimate whispers, or simply gazing at each other with the unmistakable look of people in love. Honeymooners, most likely. A pit formed in my stomach. What was I doing here? Daniel must have sensed my discomfort because he gently touched my elbow, guiding me toward a table at the edge of the restaurant with a view of the water rather than the dining area. "This okay?" he asked. I nodded gratefully. "Perfect." Dinner was surprisingly pleasant. The food was excellent, fresh seafood and tropical fruits prepared with flair, and the setting was undeniably beautiful. As darkness fell, the stars emerged in spectacular fashion, unpolluted by city lights and seeming close enough to touch. Daniel proved to be good company, steering conversation toward neutral topics, architecture projects he was working on, a book he'd recently read, funny stories about his elderly neighbor's cat that had adopted him against his will. Nothing about James, the wedding, or the strange circumstances that had brought us here. By the time we finished our dessert, a coconut panna cotta that was somehow both light and decadent, I felt more relaxed than I had in weeks. The exhaustion of travel combined with good food and the gentle sea breeze had created a temporary bubble where reality seemed distant and manageable. "Thank you," I said as we walked back to our villa under the star-filled sky. "For dinner, for this, for everything." "You don't need to keep thanking me, Emma." "I know, but I want to. This isn't a small thing you're doing." He was quiet for a moment, our footsteps on the wooden walkway the only sound besides the gentle lapping of waves. "Can I ask you something?" he finally said. "Of course." "Why did you agree to come here with me?" "Really?" I considered deflecting with a joke or a simple answer about not wasting the trip, but something in his tone deserved honesty. "At first it was just about escape," I admitted. "Getting away from the pity and the whispers." I paused. "But when you told me about Mexico, about Sylvia, something changed." "How so?" I stopped walking, turning to face him fully. In the gentle lighting of the path lanterns, his expression was both curious and concerned. I realized I didn't want to be the sad, abandoned bride anymore, the one everyone feels sorry for, the one who sits at home crying while he's off starting his new life. The anger I'd been suppressing bubbled up. He doesn't get to be the only one moving forward. He doesn't get to be the only one who gets what they want. Daniel studied me. "And what do you want, Emma?" The question caught me off guard. What did I want? Beyond the immediate desire to stop hurting, to stop feeling like a victim? I want to reclaim my life, I said slowly. I want to remember who I am without him. And someday, I took a deep breath. Someday I want him to realize exactly what he threw away. A small smile played at the corners of Daniel's mouth. Revenge, then? Is that terrible? I asked, suddenly self-conscious. Not at all. I think it's human. He resumed walking, and I fell into step beside him. And for what it's worth, I think you're handling this with remarkable grace. I laughed darkly. Running away to a tropical island with my ex's brother is grace? Considering the alternative was staying home to wallow in misery? Yes, this took courage. We reached our villa, and Daniel unlocked the door, holding it open for me. I'm not sure about courage, I said as we entered, but I do know I'm tired of letting James dictate my feelings, my actions, my future. I crossed to the huge windows, staring out at the moonlight dancing on the water. Starting tomorrow, this trip is about me. Not about what was supposed to be, not about what I lost, about what comes next. I'll drink to that, Daniel said, opening the minibar and extracting 2 bottles of water. He handed one to me with a playful toast. To what comes next. I clinked my bottle against his. To what comes next. That night I slept dreamlessly for the first time since the wedding that wasn't. Perhaps it was the exhaustion of travel, or the gentle sound of waves beneath the villa, or simply the knowledge that I was thousands of miles away from the scene of my humiliation. Whatever the reason, I woke feeling rested and, to my surprise, quietly optimistic. The harsh reality of my situation hadn't changed. I was still a woman who had been left at the altar. My fiancé was still in Mexico with another woman. I was still in the Maldives with his brother instead of on my honeymoon. But somehow, in the clear light of morning, with the sun sparkling on the endless blue water visible from my bed, these facts seemed more like circumstances to be navigated rather than disasters to be survived. I slipped out onto the deck in my pajamas, coffee in hand from the in-room machine, and was startled to find Daniel already awake, sitting in one of the lounge chairs with his own mug, a notebook open on his lap. "Morning," he said, looking up with a smile. "Sleep well?" "Surprisingly, yes." "You?" "Like a rock. The sound of the water is better than any white noise machine." I settled into the adjacent chair, curling my legs underneath me. "What are you working on?" He closed the notebook somewhat self-consciously. "Just some sketches. Occupational hazard of being an architect. I see interesting structural details, I have to draw them." "Can I see?" He hesitated, then handed me the notebook. I opened it to find a detailed drawing of our villa, capturing the elegant lines of the overwater structure with remarkable precision. "This is beautiful," I said, genuinely impressed as I flipped through more pages. Previous sketches revealed cityscapes, building details, and occasionally landscapes. "I had no idea you were so talented." Daniel shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed. "It's just something I do to clear my head." I returned the notebook, noting his obvious talent but also the personal nature of the sketches. They weren't meant for public consumption, but rather seemed like a private conversation he was having with the world around him. "So," he said, changing the subject, "what would you like to do today? The resort has a bunch of activities, snorkeling, diving, spa treatments. Or we could just relax here by our private pool." The question reminded me of my resolution from the night before, to make this trip about moving forward rather than dwelling on what should have been. "I want to do everything," I said decisively. "Everything I was looking forward to," starting with breakfast on that floating tray thing in the pool that I saw in the brochure. Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly at my enthusiasm, but he nodded. "Floating breakfast it is. I'll call it in while you get ready?" An hour later, we were seated on the edge of our infinity pool, legs dangling in the water, eating fresh fruit and pastries from a beautiful floating tray adorned with tropical flowers. The setting was undeniably romantic, the kind of experience designed specifically for couples in love, but somehow, with Daniel, it didn't feel awkward or inappropriate. It just felt nice. "I've been thinking," I said, popping a piece of mango into my mouth. "We should make a list." "A list?" "Of everything we want to do while we're here. All the experiences, excursions, whatever. And then we systematically do them all." Daniel smiled at my organizational approach. "Okay, let's make a list." We spent the next half hour planning our ideal Maldives experience, snorkeling the house reef, a sunset dolphin cruise, dining at the underwater restaurant, spa treatments, a cooking class focusing on Maldivian cuisine, a day trip to an uninhabited island. The list grew longer as we consulted the resort's activities brochure, each suggestion sparking enthusiasm from one or both of us. "This is a lot for 2 weeks," Daniel noted, looking at our completed list. "We don't have to do everything," I acknowledged. "But I want options. I want to be busy." He nodded, understanding the unspoken reason behind my desire for a packed schedule, less time to think, to remember, to grieve. "Well, the snorkeling gear is complimentary, and the house reef is supposed to be amazing. Want to start there?" he suggested. And so began our strange honeymoon. Each day had a similar structure. Breakfast together, sometimes on the deck, sometimes at one of the resort's restaurants, followed by whatever activities we'd scheduled, lunch, perhaps some relaxation time by our private pool or on the beach, then dinner and evening drinks under the stars. The resort staff, true to Daniel's arrangement, treated us like friends on vacation rather than honeymooners, though we occasionally caught curious glances from other guests. Most people, however, were too wrapped up in their own romantic getaways to pay much attention to us. To my surprise, Daniel and I settled into an easy rhythm together. He was an ideal travel companion, adventurous enough to try everything on our list, but respectful of my occasional need for solitude. When I retreated to my room for an afternoon nap or to read on my private section of the deck, he never seemed to take it personally. And when we were together, conversation flowed naturally, revealing a shared sense of humor I hadn't fully appreciated before. On our 4th day, as we returned from a particularly spectacular snorkeling expedition, where we'd seen sea turtles and a reef shark, Daniel received a text message that changed his demeanor entirely. "Everything okay?" I asked as he stared at his phone, his expression hardening. "It's nothing," he said, tucking the phone away too quickly. "Daniel," he sighed, running a hand through his salt-crusted hair. "James texted me." My heart seemed to stutter, then race. "What did he say?" Daniel hesitated, clearly reluctant to upset me. "Please," I said quietly. "I need to know." "He asked where I am. Said he's been trying to reach me." "Did you tell him?" Daniel's eyes met mine, something unreadable in their depths. "No, not yet." A strange mixture of relief and disappointment washed through me. Part of me had been hoping James would find out where we were, would realize what we'd done. The other part was grateful for more time in this bubble before reality intruded. "Are you going to answer him?" I asked. "Do you want me to?" The question hung between us, surprisingly complex. Did I want James to know where I was, who I was with? Did I want to maintain the silence? Let him wonder? Let him worry the way I had? "Not yet," I decided finally. "Let him wait." Daniel nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. "Shall we get cleaned up for dinner? We have that reservation at the underwater restaurant tonight." The underwater restaurant proved to be even more spectacular than the brochures had suggested. Located at the end of a long jetty, we descended a spiral staircase to find ourselves in a glass tunnel surrounded by the vibrant coral reef and its colorful inhabitants. Schools of fish swam overhead and beside us as we were led to our table, one of only a dozen in the intimate space. "This is incredible," I breathed, watching a manta ray glide gracefully past our window. "Worth the splurge?" Daniel asked. The underwater restaurant was the most expensive dining option at the resort, an experience I'd been particularly looking forward to. "Absolutely," I assured him, unable to tear my eyes from the marine display surrounding us. The meal was as exquisite as the setting, a 7-course tasting menu featuring the finest local and imported ingredients, paired with wines selected by the sommelier. By the 3rd course, a ceviche so fresh it practically sparkled, I was feeling pleasantly warm from the wine and more relaxed than I'd been in months. "Can I tell you something weird?" I asked, leaning slightly closer across the table. Daniel looked intrigued. "Always. I'm having a better time with you than I think I would have had with James." His eyebrows shot up. "That is weird." I laughed, then covered my mouth, suddenly aware of how the wine had loosened my tongue. "I just mean, James would have been on his phone half the time checking work emails. He would have complained about the heat, or the sand getting everywhere, or how long the boat transfers take." I twirled my wine glass thoughtfully. "You're more present." Daniel considered this, his expression thoughtful. "James has always struggled with just being in the moment. Even when we were kids, he was always thinking about the next thing, never quite satisfied with where he was or what he was doing." "Is that why you think he left?" The question slipped out before I could censor it, the wine emboldening me to broach the topic we'd been carefully avoiding. Daniel's expression softened with sympathy. "Emma, I don't think anyone but James knows why he did what he did. And even he might not fully understand it. But you must have some theory. You know him better than anyone. He sighed, taking a moment to gather his thoughts as a server arrived with our fourth course, a delicate fish preparation with an aromatic coconut broth. My brother, Daniel began after the server departed, has always been looking for something. Some undefined thing he thinks will finally make him happy. A better job, a nicer apartment, the right relationship. He met my eyes directly. I don't think he left because there was anything wrong with you, or even because of Sylvia specifically. I think he left because he's incapable of recognizing happiness when it's right in front of him. The words landed with unexpected weight, bringing tears to my eyes despite my determination to keep them at bay. I'm sorry, Daniel said immediately. I shouldn't have. No, I interrupted, blinking rapidly. No, I asked. And I appreciate your honesty. I took a steadying breath. I just wish he'd figured that out before ordering the damn cake, you know? The absurdity of it, being left at the altar over some existential crisis, struck me suddenly, and a bubble of laughter escaped me, tinged with bitterness but genuine nonetheless. Daniel's mouth quirked up at one corner. The cake was pretty spectacular. It was? 5 tiers of vanilla bean with raspberry filling and hand-painted sugar flowers that took the baker 3 weeks to create. I shook my head. What a waste. Not entirely. Your cousin's kids got to demolish it at the non-reception, according to your mom. Apparently watching children destroy an elaborate wedding cake with their bare hands was the highlight of an otherwise terrible day. This image, small children gleefully tearing into my meticulously planned wedding cake while the adults looked on in benign horror, startled a genuine laugh from me. I wish I'd seen that. Your mom has video. It's chaotic. We shared a smile across the table, the tension broken. For the remainder of the meal, we steered away from James, focusing instead on the extraordinary food and the marine life that continued to put on a show beyond the glass. By the time we emerged from the restaurant, night had fallen completely, transforming the wooden walkway into a fairy tale path lit by soft lanterns. The stars overhead were so numerous and bright they seemed artificial, like someone had scattered diamond dust across black velvet. It's not fair that places this beautiful actually exist, I said, looking up at the sparkling canopy. How is anyone supposed to go back to real life after seeing this? Daniel glanced at me, his expression soft in the low light. Maybe we take a little piece of it back with us. A memory to pull out on gray days. Is that what you do? With all the places you visited? He nodded. That, and I sketch them, so I can revisit them whenever I want. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the gentle lapping of waves and the distant music from the beach bar. Do you want to get a nightcap? Daniel asked as we passed said bar, where couples and small groups lounged on cushioned benches around low tables, drinks glowing in the candlelight. I considered it, tempted by the beautiful setting, but a wave of fatigue hit me suddenly. The cumulative effect of a day in the sun, swimming, and several glasses of wine. I think I'm ready to call it a night, I admitted, but you should go if you want. Don't let me stop you. I'm pretty tired too, actually, he said. Rain check for tomorrow? Back at our villa, we said goodnight in the shared living area, each heading to our respective rooms. As I went through my bedtime routine, washing my face, applying moisturizer to sun-kissed skin, brushing out my hair, I found myself reflecting on the evening. For the first time since James's abandonment, I'd gone hours without thinking about him, without feeling the ache of his absence or the sting of his betrayal. Instead, I'd been fully present, enjoying the extraordinary setting, the delicious food, and most surprisingly, the company. Daniel was nothing like his brother, I realized as I slipped into bed. Where James was restless, Daniel was steady. Where James was charming but often superficial, Daniel had depth and thoughtfulness. They shared the same dark hair and tall build, but that's where the resemblance ended. How strange that I'd spent 5 years with one brother, planning to spend my life with him, only to discover I might actually prefer the company of the other. The thought brought me up short. Prefer Daniel's company? Where had that come from? It was the wine, I decided, punching my pillow into a more comfortable shape. The wine and the romantic setting and the strange, suspended reality of this non-honeymoon, nothing more. Yet as I drifted toward sleep, James wasn't the face I saw behind my closed eyelids. It was Daniel's smile across the dinner table, genuine and warm in the blue-tinged light of the underwater restaurant. I woke to the gentle sound of rain pattering on the overwater villa's roof, a soothing rhythm that made me burrow deeper into the plush bedding rather than rise to face the day. Our luck with perfect weather had finally run out, it seemed. After nearly a week of cloudless skies and gentle breezes, the forecast had warned of approaching storms, though the resort staff had assured us they would be brief and intermittent. Reaching for my phone, I was surprised to see it was already past 9, later than I'd slept any morning since our arrival. The lack of sunrise streaming through the windows had allowed me to sleep in, my body grateful for the extra rest after days of non-stop activity. A text from Daniel lit up my screen. "Coffee and breakfast in the living room whenever you're up. No rush." I smiled at his consideration, taking my time with a hot shower before pulling on comfortable lounge pants and a light sweater against the cooler air the rain had brought. When I emerged, I found Daniel seated on one of the covered sections of our deck, a spread of breakfast foods on the table beside him, watching the rain create patterns on the lagoon's surface. "Morning," I said, helping myself to coffee from the carafe. "Looks like our streak of perfect weather ended." He looked up with a smile. "Just means we get to experience the Maldives in all its moods. The resort manager says these squalls usually pass by early afternoon." I settled into the adjacent chair, pulling my legs up underneath me. So much for our snorkeling plans. We could switch to an indoor activity from our list. The spa, maybe? Or that cooking class? The spa sounds perfect for a rainy day. I agreed, spreading mango jam on a still warm croissant. Though I feel a little guilty relaxing when we've been doing nothing but relaxing for a week. Daniel laughed. "I think that's the point of vacation, Emma." "I know, but..." I trailed off, unsure how to explain the restlessness that had begun creeping in around the edges of our paradise escape. "Don't you ever feel like you should be doing something more productive?" He studied me for a moment. "Is that you talking, or James?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" James was always the one who couldn't sit still, couldn't just enjoy a moment without thinking about what else he should be accomplishing. Daniel's voice was gentle, not accusatory. "But you never struck me as having that same restlessness." "Not until you started dating him." I considered this, surprised by his observation. Had I absorbed some of James's traits over our years together? His inability to simply be present, his constant need to optimize every moment? "Maybe you're right," I conceded. James was always planning the next thing, checking items off lists. So what would the Emma I first met before James do on a rainy day in paradise? I closed my eyes, trying to remember who I'd been 5 years ago, before James had swept into my life with his charm and his ambition and his carefully plotted life goals. She'd probably curl up with a good book, listen to the rain, and not feel guilty about it at all, I said with a small laugh. "Sounds perfect to me," Daniel said, picking up his own book from the side table, "though the spa is still an option if you change your mind." We spent the morning in comfortable silence, each absorbed in our reading, the gentle soundtrack of rain creating a cozy atmosphere despite the tropical setting. To my surprise, I found myself truly relaxing, the nagging voice that usually prodded me toward productivity gradually quieting until I was fully immersed in my novel. By early afternoon, the rain cleared as predicted, leaving behind fresh, clean air and renewed vibrancy to the already brilliant colors surrounding us. We decided to postpone the spa in favor of exploring the island on bicycles, the resort's fleet of beach cruisers perfect for navigating the sandy paths that wound through the lush interior. As we pedaled side by side, stopping occasionally to admire particularly beautiful vistas or interesting plants, I found myself sharing more personal thoughts than I had previously. "I think I lost myself a bit in my relationship with James," I admitted as we paused at a scenic overlook, the wet foliage around us glistening in the emerging sunlight. I was so focused on being what he needed, supporting his ambitions, fitting into his plan for the future, that I stopped asking what I actually wanted. Daniel leaned his bike against a tree, his expression thoughtful. "What do you want, Emma? When all this is over and you're back home, what's next for you?" The question was both simple and enormously complex. What did I want for my future, now that the one I'd planned had imploded? "I don't know exactly," I said slowly, "but I think I want to be more selfish in a healthy way." I put my own career ambitions on hold to support James's law practice, taking freelance graphic design jobs that were convenient rather than challenging because they gave me flexibility to manage our life together. I traced patterns in the condensation on my water bottle. "I think maybe I want to focus on my own growth for a while." Daniel nodded encouragingly. "You're incredibly talented. Your design work for my architectural portfolio was what convinced that major client to sign with my firm last year." I smiled at the memory. I'd spent weeks perfecting the digital portfolio for Daniel's pitch to a luxury hotel developer, creating visualizations that brought his architectural concepts to life. The project had been challenging and fulfilling in a way my recent work hadn't been. "Thanks for reminding me of that," I said. "It was one of my favorite projects." "You should do more work like that. Projects that excite you, that challenge your skills." "Maybe I will," I mused, surprised by the spark of enthusiasm the idea kindled. Maybe that's what comes next. We continued our bike ride, circling the entire island before returning to our villa as the sun began its spectacular descent toward the horizon. The storm had left the air crystalline, promising an exceptional sunset. "Quick swim before dinner?" Daniel suggested. "The water's probably still warm from yesterday." Without waiting for my response, he stripped off his t-shirt and dove from our deck into the clear water below, surfacing with a whoop that made me laugh. "Well," he called up, "are you coming or are you going to overthink this too?" The teasing challenge was exactly what I needed. I hurried to my room, changed into the swimsuit I'd brought, thankfully not one of the honeymoon-specific purchases, and joined him in the lagoon, the warm water enveloping me like silk. We swam until the light began to fade, racing each other to a nearby platform and back, diving to examine colorful fish that darted beneath our villa, floating on our backs to watch the sky transform from blue to gold to fiery orange. By the time we climbed the ladder back onto our deck, I felt physically tired but mentally refreshed in a way I hadn't experienced in a long time. "I needed that," I said, toweling my hair dry as we prepared to head to dinner. Daniel smiled, water still dripping from his own hair. Sometimes the simplest pleasures are the best ones. That evening at dinner, sitting at a table on the beach with our toes in the sand and candles flickering between us, I realized how comfortable I'd become in Daniel's company. The initial awkwardness had completely dissolved, replaced by an easy companionship that felt surprisingly natural. "I owe you an apology," I said as we finished our entrees, the night sky now fully dark above us and studded with stars. Daniel looked puzzled. "For what?" "When you first suggested this trip, I thought it was crazy. Inappropriate even. I only agreed because I was desperate to escape." I traced the condensation on my water glass. "But this has been healing in ways I didn't expect. So thank you for convincing me to come." His expression softened. "I'm glad it's helping. Though I should confess something too." "What's that?" "I had selfish reasons for suggesting this trip." He looked slightly uncomfortable, as if unsure whether to continue. "Besides getting a free vacation in paradise?" I teased. He smiled briefly before growing serious again. "I've been worried about you, obviously. But I've also been furious with James. Not just for what he did to you, but for—" He trailed off. "For what?" I prompted, curious about this uncharacteristic display of emotion from usually steady Daniel. He sighed. "This is going to sound strange, but I've always envied what you two had. Or what I thought you had. The connection, the future you were building together." He met my eyes directly. When he threw that away, it felt like a personal betrayal. Like if someone like James couldn't make it work with someone like you, what hope was there for any relationship? His candor surprised me. "I never realized you felt that way." Neither did I fully until he left. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, still damp from our swim. "I guess I thought bringing you here, helping you reclaim this experience, might help me make sense of it too." "Selfish, like I said." "Not selfish," I corrected gently. "Human. We're both trying to make sense of something senseless." He nodded, a small smile returning. "And drinking excellent cocktails while we do it." I laughed, grateful for the shift back to lighter territory. "Speaking of which, shall we check out that fire pit lounge for after-dinner drinks?" "It's on our list." The fire pit lounge turned out to be a circular seating area sunk into the sand, with comfortable cushions arranged around a central fire that cast a warm glow over everyone seated there. A guitarist played soft music nearby, and servers circulated with trays of tropical cocktails and desserts. We settled into a secluded section, sharing a dessert sampler and sipping drinks garnished with exotic fruits and flowers. The setting was undeniably romantic, and as I glanced around, I noted that every other group consisted of couples, many of them wrapped in intimate embraces. "We're the only non-couple here," I observed, suddenly self-conscious. Daniel followed my gaze around the circle. "Does that bother you?" I considered the question honestly. Surprisingly, no. A week ago it would have, but now, I shrugged. "I'm enjoying myself too much to care what anyone thinks." "Good." He clinked his glass against mine. "Because I'm having a great time." The simple sincerity in his voice warmed me more than the fire or the alcohol could. For the first time since James's desertion, I felt something like happiness. Not just the absence of pain, but genuine pleasure in the moment. As we walked back to our villa later, pleasantly tipsy from cocktails and tired from our active day, Daniel's phone chimed with a message notification. He glanced at it, his expression immediately darkening. James again? I guessed, the contentment I'd been feeling evaporating at the reminder of reality. Daniel nodded, slipping the phone back into his pocket without responding. What did he say this time? I asked, telling myself I didn't care but needing to know nonetheless. Daniel hesitated. He's wondering why I'm not responding. Says he needs to talk to me about something important. Are you going to answer him? Do you want me to? The same question he'd asked days earlier, but now the context felt different. We'd spent a week together in this paradise, growing closer, healing. James's intrusion felt like a violation of the safe space we'd created. Not yet, I decided. But soon we'll have to, won't we? We can't ignore him forever. Daniel nodded, his expression unreadable in the dim lighting of the path. No, we can't. But tonight isn't the time. Back at our villa, we said goodnight in the shared living area, as had become our custom. But tonight, perhaps emboldened by the cocktails or the emotional conversations we'd shared, I impulsively hugged him before retreating to my room. Thank you, I murmured against his shoulder. For today, for everything. His arms came around me, returning the embrace with gentle pressure. You don't need to keep thanking me, Emma. I know. I want to. For a brief moment, I allowed myself to enjoy the solidity of him, the faint scent of salt water still clinging to his skin beneath his cologne, the way his chin rested perfectly on top of my head. Then, before the embrace could become awkward, I stepped back with a smile. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Emma. In my room, as I went through my nighttime routine, I found myself replaying moments from the day, the way Daniel had challenged me to jump into the water, his look of concentration as he'd listened to me talk about my career aspirations, the surprising vulnerability he'd shown at dinner. Each memory brought a small smile to my lips. It wasn't until I was nearly asleep that a troubling thought surfaced. I hadn't thought about James all day, not once, until his text had interrupted our walk home. Instead, my mind had been fully occupied with the island, the experiences, and most significantly, with Daniel. What did that mean? And more importantly, what would happen when we returned to the real world and the bubble of this strange non-honeymoon burst? The midpoint of our trip arrived with a sense of bittersweet awareness. 1 week down, 1 week remaining in our paradise escape. We'd settled into a comfortable routine, each day filled with new experiences from our list, our evenings spent talking over dinner and drinks. The awkwardness that had marked our first days together had completely disappeared, replaced by an easy companionship that felt increasingly natural. Too natural, perhaps. On our 8th morning, I woke to the now familiar sounds of waves lapping beneath our villa, the gentle breeze rustling through the palm trees, and voices? Opening my eyes, I realized Daniel was speaking to someone in the living area of our villa. I checked the time. Barely past 7, earlier than we usually began our days. Curious, I slipped on a light robe over my pajamas and padded out to investigate, stopping short when I saw Daniel speaking with a resort staff member I didn't recognize. They both turned at my appearance. Good morning, Daniel said, his expression oddly tense. This is Naveen from the front desk. There's been a situation, Miss Harris, the staff member said with a polite bow. I apologize for the early disturbance. We have received several phone calls from a Mr. James Sullivan attempting to reach you or Mr. Daniel Sullivan. He claims it's an emergency. My stomach dropped. James, calling the resort directly. The bubble we'd been living in for the past week suddenly felt very fragile. Did he say what the emergency was? I asked, my voice calmer than I felt. Naveen shook his head. He would not elaborate, only insisted that we connect him to your villa. As per our privacy policy, we did not confirm whether you were guests here, but he was persistent. Since you specified on arrival that you did not wish to be disturbed, I thought it best to inform you in person rather than connect the call. I glanced at Daniel, who looked as unsettled as I felt. Thank you for your discretion, he told Naveen. If he calls again, please continue to respect our privacy request. After Naveen departed, an uncomfortable silence settled between us. The mention of James had brought reality crashing back into our carefully constructed sanctuary. Do you think there's really an emergency? I asked finally, wrapping my arms around myself. Daniel sighed, running a hand through his sleep-tousled hair. I don't know. It seems unlikely given that he's been in Mexico ignoring everyone. More likely he's figured out where we are somehow. How would he know? Credit card statements, maybe? The resort charge would have hit my account by now. Daniel looked troubled. Or someone we know saw my social media post and told him, "You posted about being here?" I hadn't been on social media since before the non-wedding, my accounts temporarily deactivated to avoid the flood of sympathetic messages and curious inquiries. Just that one sunset photo from our first night? Daniel admitted. I didn't tag the location or mention you were with me, but someone might have recognized the resort. The idea that our location had been compromised made me feel exposed, vulnerable in a way I hadn't since leaving home. The Maldives had become a safe haven, a place where James couldn't reach us, until now. What should we do? I asked. Daniel met my eyes directly. What do you want to do? We could have the resort block his calls completely. Or, he hesitated. Or what? Or I could call him back. Find out what he wants. The thought of Daniel speaking to James, of the inevitable questions and explanations, made my chest tighten with anxiety. But ignoring the situation felt equally impossible now that the intrusion had occurred. Let's have breakfast first. I decided, buying time. I need coffee before I can think clearly about this. Daniel nodded, immediately moving to prepare coffee while I called for breakfast to be delivered. We ate on the deck in uncharacteristic silence, the paradise surrounding us somehow diminished by the knowledge that our real-world problems had found us even here. I think you should call him, I said finally, setting down my coffee cup with more force than intended. Not because I care what he has to say, but because he'll keep trying to reach us otherwise. Let's get it over with. Daniel studied me carefully. Are you sure? Once that door is opened, things might change. I knew exactly what he meant. Once James knew for certain that we were here together, once we re-established contact with the world we'd left behind, the special bubble we'd been living in would be irreparably punctured. I'm sure, I said with more confidence than I felt. But I don't want to speak to him. Not yet. Daniel nodded, pulling out his phone. I'll step into my room to make the call. The 15 minutes he was gone felt like hours. I remained on the deck, watching fish dart below the villa, trying to calm my racing thoughts. What did James want? Why was he suddenly desperate to reach us after more than 2 weeks of silence? And how would I feel, hearing news of him, knowing he now knew where I was and who I was with? When Daniel finally returned, his expression was unreadable. He sat beside me without speaking, looking out at the water. Well? I prompted when the silence became unbearable. What did he say? Daniel turned to face me, his jaw tight. He wants to explain himself. To both of us, but especially to you. Says he made a terrible mistake. Something cold and hard formed in the pit of my stomach. Meaning what exactly? Meaning Sylvia apparently wasn't what he thought she was. Daniel's voice held barely controlled anger. They had a falling out in Mexico. He's back home now, and he's decided he wants to make things right with you. A disbelieving laugh escaped me. Make things right? After leaving me at the altar? After running off to Mexico with another woman? How exactly does he plan to do that? He wouldn't say specifically, just that he needs to see you in person when you return. Daniel's expression softened with concern. I told him you'd contact him if and when you were ready, and not before. And what did he say to that? He wasn't happy, demanded to know when we're coming home. And I didn't tell him. A small, satisfied smile briefly crossed Daniel's face. I said our plans were flexible and ended the call when he started getting hostile. Relief flooded through me. Thank you. Daniel reached across the table to briefly squeeze my hand. You don't have to see him when we get back, Emma. You don't owe him anything. I know. But even as I said it, I knew I would eventually have to face James. If not for closure, then to retrieve my belongings from our shared apartment, to formally disentangle our lives. The thought filled me with dread. Let's not let this ruin our day, Daniel suggested. We have that private island excursion scheduled, remember? Just us, a boat, and an uninhabited beach for the afternoon. I nodded, grateful for his attempt to preserve what remained of our escape. You're right. James has taken enough from me. He doesn't get to take this too. The private island excursion proved to be exactly what I needed. A physical removal from the resort where James had reached us, a chance to literally distance ourselves from the intrusion. A small speedboat delivered us to a tiny, uninhabited island with nothing but pristine beaches, shade trees, and the small picnic setup the resort had arranged. As we swam in the crystal-clear water, walked the circumference of the tiny island, and lounged in the shade enjoying our gourmet picnic, I felt my equilibrium slowly returning. Yes, James knew where we were. Yes, eventually I would have to deal with him. But not today. Today belonged to this island, this moment, this strange journey of recovery I was on. "What are you thinking about?" Daniel asked as we lay on adjacent beach towels, the gentle lapping of waves a few feet away providing a soothing soundtrack. "How bizarre life is," I answered honestly. 2 weeks ago, I was supposed to be getting married. Instead, I'm on a private island with my almost brother-in-law, hiding from my ex-fiancé who's decided he wants me back after abandoning me at the altar. "It's like a bad soap opera," Daniel chuckled. "When you put it that way, it does sound ridiculous." "It is ridiculous." I propped myself up on one elbow to look at him. "But do you know what's even more ridiculous? I'm actually... okay. Not great, not completely healed, but okay. I didn't think that would be possible this soon." His expression softened. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Emma." "Maybe," I conceded. "Or maybe I'm still in shock and the complete breakdown is coming later." "Maybe," he agreed with a small smile. "But I don't think so. I think you're genuinely healing." I considered this, trying to take honest stock of my emotional state. The raw, breathtaking pain of the first days after James's desertion had indeed subsided, replaced by something more complex. Anger, certainly, and lingering hurt, but also a growing sense of possibility, as if the collapse of my planned future had cleared space for something I couldn't yet envision, but which might ultimately be better. "I couldn't have done it without this trip," I said finally. "Without you?" Daniel shook his head slightly. "You would have found your way through regardless. But I'm glad I could help make it a little easier." The simple sincerity in his voice touched me deeply. Throughout this strange journey, Daniel had been unfailingly supportive without being intrusive, present without being demanding. He'd given me space to grieve, to be angry, to heal at my own pace, all while ensuring I didn't isolate myself completely. "Why are you so good to me, Daniel?" I asked softly. "Really?" He looked away, suddenly focused on the horizon. "Because you deserve it. Because what James did was wrong. Because..." He trailed off. "Because what?" Daniel sat up, drawing his knees to his chest in an uncharacteristically defensive posture. "Because I care about you, Emma. I always have." Something in his tone made my breath catch. "What do you mean?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair in a nervous gesture I'd come to recognize. "This isn't the right time for this conversation." "Tell me anyway," I insisted, sitting up to face him properly. Daniel met my eyes reluctantly. "I introduced you to James because I thought you two would hit it off, and you did. But what I never told anyone was that He took a deep breath. "I had feelings for you first. But I didn't act on them, and then you and James were together and it didn't matter anymore." The confession hung between us, reshaping everything I thought I knew about the past 5 years. Daniel had had feelings for me? Before James? The idea was so unexpected, so completely outside my understanding of our shared history, that I struggled to process it. "You never said anything," I managed finally. "How could I?" "You were with my brother, and you were happy, or seemed to be. Your relationship with James became my new normal, and I learned to see you as family, my future sister-in-law." "Until now," I said quietly. Daniel nodded, looking pained. "Until now. And I shouldn't be telling you this, not while you're still healing, not while we're here in this bubble. It's not fair to you." I studied him, seeing him with new eyes, not as James's older brother, not as my almost brother-in-law, but as a man with his own feelings, his own history, his own perspective on the complicated web of relationships we were tangled in. "It explains a lot," I said finally. "Why you suggested this trip? Why you've been so supportive." "I suggested this trip because you deserve to get away from the gossip and the pity," he corrected firmly. "Because the honeymoon was paid for, and you should have something good come out of this mess." My feelings didn't factor into it. But they had, I realized. They must have. Even if Daniel hadn't consciously intended it, his long-buried feelings for me had influenced his decision to offer this escape, to accompany me to paradise, to spend 2 weeks in my constant company. "Are you angry?" he asked when I remained silent, processing this revelation. "No," I answered truthfully. "Not angry, just recalibrating." It was an accurate description of the strange sensation sweeping through me, as if the lens through which I viewed our shared history needed adjusting to accommodate this new information. Daniel had had feelings for me, possibly still did. and I had never known. I shouldn't have told you, he said, regret evident in his voice. The last thing you need right now is more complication. No, I disagreed, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I'm glad you told me. I don't like being kept in the dark about things that involve me. The pointed reference to James's secrecy wasn't lost on Daniel. He nodded, acceptance replacing the worry in his expression. You're right. You deserve honesty. He stood, extending a hand to help me up. For what it's worth, I don't expect anything from you, Emma. Not a response, not reciprocation, nothing. I just couldn't keep pretending that you're still just my brother's ex to me. Not after these past days together. I took his hand, allowing him to pull me to my feet, suddenly very aware of our physical proximity, of the warm strength of his hand around mine, of the sincerity in his eyes. I don't know what to say, I admitted. You don't have to say anything, he assured me. Let's just enjoy the rest of our time here day by day. No pressure. Deal? I nodded, grateful for his understanding, for the space he was giving me to process this unexpected development. Deal. As we gathered our things to signal for the boat to return, I found myself viewing Daniel through this new lens, noticing details I'd previously overlooked or taken for granted. The considerate way he packed up our picnic, carefully making sure nothing was left behind on the pristine beach. The easy grace with which he helped me into the boat when it arrived. The quiet strength he projected without demanding attention. Had there been signs of his feelings that I'd missed over the years? Moments when his careful friendliness had concealed deeper emotions? I couldn't recall any obvious hints, but then I hadn't been looking. I'd been focused on James, on our relationship, on our future together. Daniel had been a peripheral figure, important as family, but not someone I'd scrutinized for hidden meanings or unspoken feelings. The return journey to the resort passed in contemplative silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts as the boat skimmed across the water. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in the spectacular oranges and pinks that had become a nightly display during our stay. Let's skip the restaurant tonight, I suggested as we disembarked at the resort's main dock. Order room service instead. I need some time to think. Daniel nodded, understanding in his eyes. Whatever you need, Emma. Back at our villa, we retreated to our respective rooms with a brief, slightly awkward goodnight. For the first time since our arrival, I felt a barrier between us, not anger or resentment, but a new awareness that made our easy companionship suddenly complicated. In the privacy of my room, I sank onto the bed, my mind racing. First James's calls to the resort, disrupting our carefully constructed peace. Then Daniel's confession, reshaping my understanding of our shared past. It was too much to process all at once. I ordered a light dinner and ate on my private section of the deck, watching the sunset alone, trying to sort through my tangled thoughts. James wanted to make things right. Daniel had feelings for me, possibly had always had feelings for me, and what did I want? The question haunted me as night fell, as the stars emerged in their now familiar splendor, as the gentle sounds of the water beneath the villa provided a soothing counterpoint to my chaotic thoughts. What did I want? Not James, that much I knew with certainty. Whatever explanation or apology he might offer, there was no coming back from what he'd done. The trust was irreparably broken. The future we'd planned was ashes. But Daniel? The question made my heart race in a way that was both frightening and exhilarating. Over the past week and a half, he'd become more than James's brother, more than a convenient escape companion. He'd become someone I looked forward to seeing each morning, someone whose company I genuinely enjoyed, someone who made me laugh and think and feel safe in a world that had suddenly become unpredictable. Was that friendship? Gratitude? Or something deeper that I'd been too afraid to acknowledge? I had no answers, not yet. Only questions, and the unsettling awareness that what had begun as a simple act of revenge, taking my honeymoon without the groom, had evolved into something far more complex than I could have anticipated. As I finally prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a text. I tensed, half expecting it to be from James, but was relieved to see Daniel's name instead. Just want to be sure we're okay. Forget what I said if it makes things easier. Your healing is what matters. His consideration, even in the midst of what must be his own emotional turmoil, touched me deeply. I typed a response with careful thought. We're okay. I just need time to process everything. Thank you for your honesty. See you in the morning. As I set my phone aside and turned off the lights, I made a decision. For the remainder of our time in this paradise, I would be present, open, honest with myself about what I was feeling, without rushing to label it or make decisions. We had one more week before returning to reality, one more week in this extraordinary bubble where normal rules seemed suspended. Whatever came next, with James, with Daniel, with my own recovery, could wait until we returned home. For now, I would simply allow myself to be here, fully, in this moment, in this place, with this man who'd shown me more kindness and understanding than anyone else in my life right now. It wasn't a solution, but it was a start. And for tonight, that was enough. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through my windows and the gentle sound of waves beneath the villa. For a moment, lying in the plush bed with paradise visible through the panoramic windows, I could almost pretend the previous day's revelations hadn't occurred, that we were still in our simple escape bubble, free from complications. But reality has a way of persisting, even in paradise. When I finally emerged from my room, I found Daniel already on the deck with coffee and breakfast laid out as usual. He looked up as I approached, his expression carefully neutral, giving nothing away of his own feelings. "Morning," he said, pouring coffee into the second mug. "Sleep okay?" "Not really," I admitted, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Too much to think about?" He nodded, understanding without needing elaboration. "We can cancel today's plans if you want. Take a day to just be." The consideration in the offer touched me. What was on the schedule again? "The dolphin cruise this afternoon." "But it's completely up to you." I considered for a moment, weighing my emotional state against the opportunity. "Let's go," I decided. "I've been looking forward to it, and I don't want to waste our time here overthinking things." Relief flickered across his face. "Okay, good." We ate breakfast in companionable silence, the initial awkwardness gradually fading as we settled into our familiar routine. By the time we boarded the resort's comfortable cruiser that afternoon, along with about a dozen other guests, we'd reached a tentative new equilibrium, not quite the easy companionship of before, but not uncomfortable either. Just aware of each other, of the unspoken feelings between us, of the complexity of our situation. The dolphin cruise turned out to be everything the brochure had promised. About 20 minutes from the resort, the captain slowed the boat, and suddenly we were surrounded by spinner dolphins, dozens of them, playing in the boat's wake and leaping into the air with balletic grace. "Oh my God," I breathed, rushing to the railing for a better view. "They're incredible." Daniel joined me, his camera in hand to capture the spectacular display. The dolphins seemed to be performing just for us, spinning and jumping with evident joy, their sleek bodies glistening in the late afternoon sun. "I've never seen anything like this," he said, snapping photos as a particularly acrobatic dolphin completed a perfect aerial spin. For the next hour, we were completely absorbed in the experience, all tension forgotten as we marveled at these extraordinary creatures in their natural environment. When the dolphins finally moved on and the boat turned back toward the resort, I realized I was smiling, genuinely, unreservedly smiling, for the first time since our conversation on the private island. "Thank you for suggesting we come," I said as we leaned against the railing, watching the sun begin its descent toward the horizon. "I needed this." Daniel nodded, his own expression relaxed. "Me too." "Daniel," I began, gathering courage for what I needed to say. "About yesterday." "You don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "Really, Emma?" "I do, though." I turned to face him fully. "You were brave enough to be honest with me. I owe you the same honesty in return." He fell silent, waiting, his expression carefully guarded. "I don't know what I feel right now," I admitted. "Everything is still so raw, so confused. There's still so much unresolved with James, with my own future, with everything." I took a deep breath. "But I do know that these past days with you have been special, important, and whatever happens when we go back home, I'm grateful for this time together." Daniel's expression softened. "That's more than enough for me, Emma. I didn't tell you about my feelings to pressure you or to complicate things. I just couldn't keep pretending that this trip hasn't meant something to me, that you don't mean something to me." The simple sincerity in his voice touched me deeply. No games, no manipulation, just honest emotion expressed without expectation. "One day at a time?" I suggested, offering the phrase that had become something of a mantra during our stay. He smiled, relief evident in his eyes. "One day at a time." As the boat docked at the resort, something had shifted between us again, not back to our previous ease exactly, but to something new. A tentative exploration, perhaps. An openness to possibility without pressure or expectation. That evening, we dined at one of the resort's more casual restaurants, conversation flowing more naturally than I'd feared it might. We discussed the dolphins, the other excursions still on our list, books we'd both read, everything except James or Daniel's confession or my confused feelings. It was a tacit agreement to focus on the present, on enjoying our remaining time in paradise without forcing conclusions we weren't ready to reach. After dinner, as we strolled along the beach, the night warm and star-filled above us, Daniel surprised me with a suggestion. "There's a meteor shower tonight," he said, pointing to a notice on the activities board. "The resort is setting up loungers on the beach away from the lights. Wanna go?" The idea of lying side by side under shooting stars seemed dangerously romantic, but also irresistibly appealing. That sounds perfect. We followed the path to a darkened stretch of beach where several cushioned loungers had been arranged, some already occupied by couples. A resort staff member provided us with blankets against the slight chill and directed us to 2 adjacent loungers positioned for optimal sky viewing. As we settled in, the vast canopy of stars spread above us in breathtaking brilliance, unobscured by pollution or artificial light. The Milky Way was clearly visible, a brilliant river of stars cutting across the darkness. "It's incredible," I whispered, not wanting to break the spell with normal volume. "I've never seen so many stars." "City living has its drawbacks," Daniel agreed softly beside me. "We forget what the night sky really looks like." We fell silent, watching as the first meteor streaked across the sky, a brief, brilliant trail of light that elicited a collective gasp from everyone on the beach. More followed, some faint, some spectacularly bright, each a moment of magic in the velvety darkness. I don't know exactly when it happened, but at some point, Daniel's hand found mine between our loungers, his fingers intertwining with mine in a gentle, tentative touch. I didn't pull away, allowing the simple connection as we continued to watch the celestial display above us. It wasn't a declaration or a commitment, just an acknowledgement of whatever was growing between us, this fragile new thing that had no name yet. And for now, that was enough. We stayed until the meteor shower waned, until other couples began drifting back to their villas, until the only sounds were the gentle lapping of waves and our own quiet breathing. "We should probably head back," Daniel said finally, reluctantly releasing my hand. I nodded, equally reluctant to end this perfect moment. "Probably." As we walked back to our villa, a comfortable silence between us, I found myself wondering at the strange twist my life had taken. 2 weeks ago, I'd been devastated, humiliated, broken by James's abandonment. Now I was walking under a canopy of stars with his brother, my heart tentatively opening to possibilities I'd never imagined. Life was strange indeed. At our villa, we paused in the shared living area, the moment laden with unspoken thoughts and feelings. "Good night, Emma," Daniel said softly, making no move to bridge the distance between us physically, respecting the careful boundary we'd maintained. "Good night, Daniel," I replied, equally careful. "Thank you for tonight. For the stars." He smiled, the expression warming his eyes. "Thank you for holding my hand." The simple acknowledgement made me blush, grateful for the dim lighting that concealed it. "One day at a time," I reminded him and myself. "One day at a time?" He echoed with a nod. In my room, as I prepared for bed, I found myself replaying the feeling of his hand in mine. Warm, strong, secure. Such a simple touch, yet it had felt significant, a crossing of some invisible threshold. Tomorrow marked the beginning of our final week in paradise, I realized. 7 more days in this extraordinary bubble before we had to return to reality, to face the consequences of James's actions, to figure out what came next. 7 days to continue healing, to explore these new, fragile feelings, to prepare for whatever awaited us back home. I fell asleep thinking not of the past, of what I'd lost, but of the present, of dolphins spinning in the sunlight and meteors streaking across the night sky, and Daniel's hand holding mine as we watched the universe put on a show just for us. The next few days passed in a delicate balance of normal vacation activities and subtle, cautious exploration of the shifting dynamic between us. We continued working through our activity list, snorkeling, a sunset fishing trip, the Maldivian cooking class we'd postponed, but now there was a new awareness underlying our interactions, a careful attentiveness to each other that hadn't been there before. Small things changed. Daniel's hand at the small of my back as we boarded a boat. my fingers lingering on his arm as I pointed out a particularly colorful fish beneath the surface, sitting closer together at dinner than strictly necessary. Each touch brief, tentative but deliberate, testing boundaries, acknowledging the new possibility between us without rushing toward definition. We didn't discuss it directly, as if putting words to this fragile new thing might somehow break it. Instead, we existed in a state of heightened awareness, present in each moment, each small connection significant but unanalyzed. On our 12th day, we scheduled the spa treatments we'd postponed due to rain earlier in our stay. The resort's spa was perched over the water like our villa, individual treatment rooms with glass floors allowing views of the marine life below during massages and treatments. "We have a couple's package reserved for you," the spa receptionist said when we arrived. "The indulgence journey. Is that correct?" I tensed slightly. A couple's package. Of course, it would have been booked for a honeymooning couple, not for whatever Daniel and I were. "Is there a problem?" the receptionist asked, noting my hesitation. "We're not," I began, then stopped, unsure how to explain. "Can you tell us what the package involves?" Daniel asked smoothly, saving me from the awkward explanation. The receptionist smiled. "The indulgence journey begins with a foot ritual, followed by body exfoliation treatments, then side-by-side massages. After that, a flower bath is prepared while you enjoy fruit and champagne on your private deck. The entire experience lasts 3 hours. It sounded heavenly, and also intimately romantic in a way that made me nervous given our current undefined status. "Would you prefer separate treatments?" the receptionist asked when neither of us immediately responded. Daniel looked at me, silently deferring to my preference. "It's up to you," he said quietly. I considered for a moment. The couple's package had been part of our honeymoon plan, something I'd been looking forward to. Did I want to sacrifice the experience because of awkwardness? Would separate treatments actually be less awkward, knowing we'd changed the plans due to discomfort? "The original package is fine," I decided, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "We'll keep the booking as is." Relief and something like pleasure flickered in Daniel's eyes before he carefully schooled his expression to neutral. "If you're sure?" "I'm sure." The spa experience turned out to be even more luxurious than described. We were led to a large overwater treatment suite with 2 massage tables positioned side by side, floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic ocean views, and a private deck with a large soaking tub built for 2. After changing into plush robes in separate dressing areas, we began with the foot ritual, a soothing warm water soak with essential oils, followed by gentle exfoliation. 2 therapists worked simultaneously, one for each of us, creating an atmosphere of synchronized indulgence. For the body exfoliation, we were discreetly draped and worked on one at a time, the other relaxing on the deck with tea until their turn. The massage portion was performed simultaneously, the therapists working in tandem to the same soothing music, their movements so coordinated it felt like a choreographed dance. Throughout, Daniel and I exchanged occasional glances or smiles, but mostly kept our eyes closed, surrendering to the blissful experience. There was intimacy in being pampered together, certainly, but the professional setting and expert care of the therapists kept it from feeling uncomfortable. After the massages, the therapists prepared the flower bath on the deck, filling the large soaking tub with warm water and strewing it with fresh blossoms that filled the air with their sweet scent. A tray of fresh fruit, 2 glasses, and a bottle of champagne in an ice bucket were placed nearby. "Take your time," one therapist said as they prepared to leave us to enjoy the final portion of the treatment. "The bath is ideal at this temperature for about 20 minutes. You have the suite for another hour. Simply call when you're ready to be escorted back to the main spa." As the door closed behind them, Daniel and I were left alone in the luxurious suite, the flower bath steaming invitingly on the deck, champagne waiting to be poured. "Well," Daniel said after a moment, a hint of uncertainty in his voice, "this is awkward?" I supplied with a small laugh. I was going to say lovely, but yes, also potentially awkward. He ran a hand through his hair, slightly mussed from the massage. "We can skip the bath part if you're uncomfortable. Just enjoy the champagne and view." I considered this, aware of the intimacy implied in sharing the flower bath, but also oddly reluctant to forego the experience. The past 12 days had created a bond between us that defied simple categorization, not quite romantic, but no longer purely friendly either. We existed in some undefined middle space, careful but increasingly comfortable with each other. "I think," I said slowly, That we're both adults who can share a large bathtub without it being weird. We'll keep our swimsuits on. I'd worn mine under my robe, anticipating some kind of water treatment, and assumed he had done the same. Relief and something like admiration flickered in his eyes. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." I gestured to the champagne. "Pour while I get in?" I didn't wait for his response, moving to the private side of the deck where I could slip off my robe and enter the bath with minimal exposure. The warm water embraced me, flower petals swirling around my shoulders as I settled into one end of the spacious tub, the bubbles and blossoms providing natural modesty coverage. Daniel appeared a moment later, 2 glasses of champagne in hand, his chest bare above his swim shorts. I'd seen him shirtless before during our swimming excursions, but something about the intimate setting made me newly aware of his athletic build, the defined muscles of his shoulders and arms, the dark hair tapering down his chest. He handed me a glass before entering the other side of the tub, maintaining a respectful distance between us. "To relaxation?" he said, raising his glass in a toast. "To relaxation," I echoed, taking a sip of the crisp champagne, letting it fizz pleasantly on my tongue. "This is divine. The whole experience has been—" He settled more comfortably against his side of the tub, his long legs carefully positioned to avoid brushing against mine in the shared space. "Best spa treatment I've ever had." "Same." I closed my eyes briefly, allowing myself to fully appreciate the multiple sensations, the warm, fragrant water, the residual looseness in my muscles from the expert massage, the taste of champagne, the gentle sea breeze against my face. I think I could stay here forever. In this tub or in the Maldives? I opened my eyes to find him watching me with a soft expression. "Both," I admitted. "I'm not looking forward to going back." The reality of our impending return hung between us, unspoken but impossible to ignore. In just a few days, we would board a plane back to real life, back to the consequences of James's actions, back to decisions that couldn't be postponed indefinitely. "Me neither," Daniel confessed. "These have been special days." The simple acknowledgement made my throat tighten unexpectedly. "They have." We sipped our champagne in companionable silence, watching the sunlight dance on the water visible beyond our private deck. Fish darted beneath the clear surface, oblivious to the human drama unfolding above them. "Can I ask you something?" I said finally, setting my empty glass on the edge of the tub. "Of course. What happens when we go back? With us, I mean." The question had been haunting me, growing more insistent as our departure date approached. Daniel considered this, his expression thoughtful. "Whatever you want to happen, Emma. There's no pressure, no expectations." "But what do you want?" I pressed, needing more than diplomatic neutrality. He met my eyes directly then, all pretense of casualness gone. "I want to keep seeing you. Not as James's ex, not as my almost sister-in-law, but as you. Emma. A woman I've come to care for deeply." He paused. "But I also understand that might be complicated given everything that's happened. So I'll respect whatever boundaries you need." The honesty in his answer touched me deeply. No games, no manipulation, just straightforward expression of his feelings and respect for mine. "It would be complicated," I acknowledged, running my fingers through the flower-strewn water. "Your family, our mutual friends. Everyone would have opinions." "Probably," he agreed. "Does that matter to you?" I considered the question seriously. Would the inevitable gossip, the questions, the judgment from others influence my feelings or decisions? "It matters less than it would have before," I realized aloud. Being left at the altar puts a lot of things in perspective. After public humiliation that profound, what's a little gossip about dating my ex's brother? A smile tugged at his lips. "So you're considering dating me?" I felt a flush rise to my cheeks, not entirely due to the warm water. "I'm considering exploring whatever this is between us." Slowly, carefully, I met his gaze. "If that's okay with you?" The smile bloomed fully on his face, transforming his features with a joy that made my heart skip. "That's very okay with me, Emma." Something shifted between us in that moment, a decision made, a direction chosen. Not a commitment yet, but an acknowledgement of possibility, of potential worth exploring despite the complications. "We should probably get out before we turn into prunes," I said after a moment, suddenly aware of how long we'd been soaking. He nodded, reaching for a nearby towel. "I'll go first and wait inside." "Give you privacy?" This thoughtful consideration, so characteristic of him, warmed me more than the bath had. "Thank you." After drying off and changing back into our regular clothes, we returned to our villa feeling relaxed and refreshed from the spa treatments, but also energized by our conversation, by the tentative plans we'd begun to formulate for when we returned home. "Walk on the beach before dinner?" Daniel suggested as the afternoon began to wane toward evening. Perfect. We strolled along the shore, feet sinking into soft white sand, the setting sun painting the sky in increasingly dramatic hues of orange and pink. Without conscious decision, our hands found each other, fingers intertwining as we walked. It felt right, this small connection. Not rushed, not forced, just a natural expression of the growing closeness between us. "I keep thinking about James," I admitted, breaking the comfortable silence. "Not in a longing way," I added quickly when Daniel tensed slightly beside me, "but about what he'll say when he finds out about this." I raised our joined hands slightly. "Are you worried about his reaction?" I considered this. Not worried exactly. I just want to be prepared. For the accusations, the guilt trips, whatever's coming. Daniel nodded, understanding in his eyes. He'll probably be angry, hurt, possibly feel betrayed. Even though he's the one who left me at the altar and ran off with another woman, I couldn't keep the bitterness from my voice. People aren't always logical about these things. Daniel's thumb traced gentle patterns on the back of my hand. "But whatever he says, whatever he does, remember that you haven't done anything wrong, Emma. Neither of us has." I knew he was right logically. James had forfeited any claim to me or to controlling my future when he'd abandoned me on our wedding day. Yet emotional logic rarely aligns perfectly with intellectual understanding, and some small part of me still flinched at the thought of hurting him despite everything. "We'll face it together," Daniel said simply. "Whatever comes." The words were a promise, offering strength and partnership for the challenges ahead. I squeezed his hand in silent gratitude as we continued our walk, the sunset reaching its spectacular peak before us. That night at dinner, seated at a table on the beach with candles flickering between us, we talked more concretely about returning home, practical matters like flight times and transportation from the airport, but also tentative plans for seeing each other once we were back. "Maybe we start with something simple," Daniel suggested as we shared a dessert. "Dinner? A movie? Normal dating activities far away from prying eyes." I smiled at the thought. How traditional it sounded after our extraordinary beginning in this paradise setting. Normal sounds nice, actually. "I think I've had enough drama to last a lifetime." "Agreed," he said fervently, making me laugh. As we walked back to our villa, hands linked comfortably between us, I was struck by how natural it felt, this transition from friends to something more. There was no awkwardness now. No hesitation in our touches or glances, just a growing certainty that whatever was developing between us was worth exploring, worth protecting, worth fighting for if necessary. At our villa door, Daniel paused, turning to face me fully. The moonlight illuminated his features, his expression serious but soft. "I want to kiss you," he said simply. "But I don't want to rush you. So I'll wait until you're ready, whether that's tonight or next week or next month." The honesty of the statement, the respect inherent in it, touched me deeply. Here was a man who understood consent, who prioritized my comfort and healing above his own desires. The contrast with James's self-centered choices was stark and illuminating. In response, I rose on tiptoe and pressed my lips gently to his, not a passionate embrace but a tender acknowledgement of what was growing between us. His hand came up to cup my cheek, returning the kiss with equal gentleness, asking nothing more than I was ready to give. When we parted, his smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. "Worth waiting for?" he murmured. Inside our villa, we said goodnight as usual, retreating to our separate rooms. But something fundamental had changed. We were no longer just escape companions or almost family or friends finding comfort in shared trauma. We were two people choosing each other, deliberately, eyes open to the complications but willing to face them together. As I prepared for bed, I realized with some surprise that I hadn't thought of James all evening, not until our conversation about his potential reaction. He no longer occupied the center of my thoughts, no longer defined my emotional state. The grief and humiliation that had been my constant companions since the wedding day had receded, replaced by something new and tentatively hopeful. It wasn't that I'd forgotten or forgiven what he'd done. The hurt was still there, but it no longer controlled me. I was moving forward, not because I was running away from pain, but because I was moving toward something promising, something genuine, something that felt right in a way I'd never expected to find in the aftermath of such betrayal. I fell asleep that night not with thoughts of revenge or closure or healing, but with the simple, surprising joy of new beginnings, of Daniel's smile in the moonlight, of his gentle kiss, of possibilities unfurling before us like the endless horizon visible from our villa deck. Tomorrow would bring us one day closer to returning home, to facing reality, to navigating the complicated aftermath of James's actions and our own choices. But tonight, in this moment, I was exactly where I wanted to be. In paradise, yes, but more importantly, on the threshold of something real and true and unexpected. It wasn't the honeymoon I'd planned. It was something better. A journey of recovery, discovery, and the most surprising twist of all, the tentative beginning of love where I'd least expected to find it. Our final days in paradise took on a bittersweet quality, each experience tinged with awareness of its finitude, each sunset one fewer we would witness together in this extraordinary setting. We became almost zealous in our determination to squeeze every possible moment of joy from our remaining time, checking off the last items on our activity list with enthusiastic focus. We snorkeled one final time over the house reef, holding hands underwater as we drifted above coral formations teeming with marine life. We took a sunset cruise on a traditional Maldivian dhoni, sipping cocktails as the sun melted into the horizon in a spectacular display of color. We had our names carved into coconut shells as souvenirs by a local artisan, a tangible memory to take home. And through it all, our connection deepened, strengthened by shared experiences and increasingly open conversations about what awaited us back home. The tentative nature of our physical relationship remained, hand-holding, brief kisses, embraces that lingered but never evolved into more, both of us silently agreeing that certain thresholds would be better crossed away from the fantasy setting of our non-honeymoon. I made a decision. I told Daniel over our final dinner at the underwater restaurant, our last night in the Maldives, about James. Daniel set down his fork, giving me his full attention. "What's that?" "I'm going to see him when we get back. To talk. To get closure." I took a sip of wine, gathering my thoughts. I need to face him directly, not hide from the confrontation. And I need to do it alone. He nodded slowly, no hint of jealousy or concern in his expression. "I think that's wise." "You do?" I hadn't expected immediate support, had been prepared to defend my decision. "Emma, as much as I'd like to be there to support you, this is something between you and James. A conversation that needs to happen for you to fully move forward." He reached across the table to briefly touch my hand. "I trust you completely." The simple statement warmed me more than any passionate declaration could have. Trust, after betrayal, after humiliation, after the foundation of my life had been shaken, was a precious gift. "Thank you," I said softly, "for understanding. Just promise me one thing." "What's that?" His expression turned serious. "Be careful with yourself. James has a way of manipulating situations, of making people see things his way. Don't let him make you doubt your own experiences or feelings." The warning surprised me with its insight. James did indeed have that talent, the ability to reframe events in ways that suited his narrative, to charm and persuade until you questioned your own perceptions. It was part of what made him a successful lawyer, but in personal relationships, it could be subtly destructive. "I promise," I said, grateful for the reminder to stay grounded in my own truth. This isn't about reconciliation or even forgiveness, really. It's about me saying what I need to say, hearing what he has to say, and then closing that chapter definitively. Daniel nodded, satisfaction in his eyes. "Then I support you completely." The remainder of our final dinner passed in a blend of nostalgia for our time in paradise and cautious excitement about what awaited us at home. We reminisced about our favorite moments. The dolphins, the private island, the meteor shower, and made tentative plans for a first official date once we'd had time to settle back into reality. After dinner, we walked along the beach one last time, the now familiar constellations bright overhead, the warm breeze carrying the scent of tropical flowers and salt water. "I don't want to go back," I admitted, my head resting against Daniel's shoulder as we paused to watch the moonlight dance on the waves. "I know we have to, but part of me wants to stay in this bubble forever." "We could," he suggested with playful seriousness. "Sell everything, change our names, become beach bums who teach tourists how to snorkel." I laughed at the image. Tempting, but unrealistic. Very unrealistic, he agreed with a smile. Besides, I think what we've found here will travel with us. It doesn't have to end just because we're leaving the Maldives. The simple confidence in his voice reassured me. What we'd built here wasn't just a vacation romance, a temporary escape from reality. It was something real, something with potential to grow and thrive, even in the complications of our normal lives. You're right, I said, turning to face him fully. This is just the beginning. In response, he pulled me close, his kiss deeper and more certain than our previous careful exchanges. I wrapped my arms around his neck, returning the embrace with equal fervor, allowing myself to fully experience the desire that had been building between us, tempered by respect and caution. When we finally parted, both slightly breathless, his smile was luminous in the moonlight. Definitely just the beginning, he agreed. Back at our villa, packing loomed as an unwelcome necessity. We'd been advised to prepare our luggage that night, as our early morning seaplane departure meant little time for organization in the morning. I tackled the task methodically, folding sundresses and swimsuits still slightly damp from final swims, tucking away souvenirs wrapped in resort laundry bags for protection. As I worked, I found myself reflecting on how different I felt from the woman who had arrived 2 weeks earlier, broken, humiliated, seeking only escape and perhaps a petty revenge. That version of me seemed distant now, a stranger I viewed with compassion but no longer inhabited. What had begun as an act of defiance, taking my honeymoon without the groom, had transformed into something I never could have anticipated. A healing journey, yes, but also the beginning of something new, something that felt more honest and balanced than what I'd lost. A soft knock at my door interrupted these reflections. "Come in," I called, assuming Daniel had a question about our departure logistics. He entered, carrying something carefully in his hands, the leather-bound sketchbook I'd seen him working in throughout our stay. "I wanted to give you this before we leave," he said, oddly hesitant. "It's not much, but—" He handed me the book, and I opened it with curious hands. Inside were dozens of sketches, the view from our villa deck, the private island where he'd first confessed his feelings, the dolphins leaping in the sunlight, the star-filled sky above the beach. Each drawing captured not just the visual scene, but somehow the emotional essence of the moment, rendered with remarkable skill and sensitivity. And interspersed among the landscapes were sketches of me, reading on the deck, smiling over breakfast, concentrating during our cooking class, swimming in our private pool. Each portrait drawn with such care and obvious affection that my throat tightened with emotion. "Daniel," I whispered, turning pages slowly, absorbing the visual diary of our time together. "These are beautiful. I wanted you to have something to remember this by," he said quietly. "Something personal." I looked up to find him watching me with vulnerability in his eyes, as if unsure how I would receive this intimate gift. "I love it," I said simply, truthfully. "It's perfect." Relief washed over his features, followed by pleasure at my reaction. "I'm glad." I set the sketchbook carefully on the bed before stepping forward to embrace him, my arms wrapping around his waist, my cheek resting against his chest where I could hear the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Thank you," I murmured. "Not just for this, but for everything. For suggesting this trip, for being patient, for showing me that there's life after betrayal." His arms tightened around me, one hand coming up to stroke my hair gently. "Thank you for being brave enough to come, for giving us, a chance." We stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the quiet of my room, both aware that tomorrow would bring a return to reality, to complications, to decisions that couldn't be postponed indefinitely. But for now, in this moment, there was just gratitude, connection, and the precious certainty that neither of us was facing the future alone. "We should finish packing," I said finally, reluctantly stepping back. "Early wake-up call tomorrow." He nodded, though neither of us moved immediately, both reluctant to end this moment, to close the chapter on our time in paradise. "One last sunrise on the deck before we leave?" he suggested. "Coffee? One final Maldivian breakfast?" I smiled, grateful for the suggestion. "Perfect." After a gentle goodnight kiss, he returned to his own room to complete his packing, leaving me to finish mine. I placed his sketchbook carefully in my carry-on bag, unwilling to risk it in checked luggage. Too precious to lose, this tangible record of our extraordinary time together. Our final morning arrived with an impossible sunrise, as if the Maldives were determined to make our departure as difficult as possible. Pink and gold streaked across the sky, reflecting in the calm waters beneath our villa, creating a scene so beautiful it almost hurt to look at it. We sat side by side on our deck, coffee mugs in hand, watching the spectacle in appreciative silence. This moment needed no words, just presence, just awareness of beauty and transition, and the bittersweet nature of endings that are also beginnings. The journey home was long and tedious. Seaplane to Malé, commercial flight to Dubai, layover, then the long transatlantic flight home. Throughout, Daniel remained the thoughtful travel companion he'd been on our journey out, ensuring I had water and snacks, offering his shoulder as a pillow when exhaustion overtook me, maintaining gentle physical contact that felt both comforting and promising. As our plane began its final descent toward home, reality loomed larger with each passing minute. Soon we would be back in the world of consequences and explanations, of James's presence and others' opinions, of decisions that would shape our futures. Nervous? Daniel asked quietly, noting my tension as the landing gear deployed with a mechanical whine. A little, I admitted. It feels like we've been in a different universe these past 2 weeks. Coming back to reality is scary, he finished for me when I trailed off. I know. But remember, whatever happens, we face it together. I squeezed his hand, grateful for the simple reassurance. Together, as we navigated customs and baggage claim, the mundane details of travel providing a buffer between paradise and reality, I found myself mentally preparing for what came next. My planned conversation with James, returning to my parents' house, where I'd been staying before the trip, explaining to friends and family where I'd been and, more complicated, the shifting relationship between Daniel and me. My car's in long-term parking, Daniel said as we finally emerged into the arrival hall, luggage in tow. Can I drive you to your parents? I nodded, grateful to postpone saying goodbye for a little longer. Please. They're expecting me, but not until later. Our flight arrived early. The drive was quiet, both of us tired from travel and lost in our own thoughts about the transition back to normal life. When Daniel pulled up in front of my parents' suburban home, a strange awkwardness descended, our first since the early days of our trip. So, he said, turning off the engine. Home. Home, I echoed, looking at the familiar house with mixed emotions. It represented safety, certainly, but also regression, back to being the abandoned bride living with her parents, dependent and diminished. Emma, Daniel said, breaking into my thoughts. I meant what I said in the Maldives. About us. About wanting to see where this goes. I turned to face him fully. I know. I did too. So what happens now? The question hung between us, simple yet enormously complex. What did happen now? How did we transition from paradise to reality without losing what we'd found? Now I get settled, deal with James, sort out my living situation, I said practically. And you do whatever you need to do to readjust to real life. And then, I reached for his hand. And then we have that dinner we talked about. A proper first date. Relief washed over his features. I'd like that. Me too. I leaned across the console to kiss him briefly, a promise of more to come. I'll call you tomorrow? He nodded, returning the kiss with gentle pressure. I'll be waiting. As I gathered my luggage and walked up the familiar path to my parents' front door, I felt Daniel watching, waiting until I was safely inside before driving away. The consideration warmed me, a reminder of the man I'd discovered beneath the label of James's brother. Over the past 2 weeks, my parents greeted me with enthusiasm, my mother hugging me tightly while my father brought in my bags. Questions about the trip, about how I was feeling, about what came next, flew at me from both directions, and I answered as honestly as I could while omitting the more complex developments with Daniel. That conversation needed more energy than I had after nearly 24 hours of travel. I'm exhausted, I said finally, interrupting my mother's detailed update on wedding gift returns. Would you mind if I shower and take a nap before we tackle everything else? She immediately looked contrite. Of course, sweetheart. We have plenty of time to talk later. In the sanctuary of my childhood bedroom, I allowed myself to finally decompress, from the long journey, from the emotional complexity of returning home, from the suspended reality of the past 2 weeks. I showered away the travel grime, changed into comfortable clothes, and curled up on my bed, intending to nap but finding my mind too active for sleep. Instead, I opened Daniel's sketchbook, allowing the beautiful drawings to transport me back to the Maldives, to the peace and clarity I'd found there. Among the final sketches was one I hadn't noticed during my first look, a drawing of me standing on our villa deck at sunset, looking out at the horizon with an expression of serenity and strength that caught me by surprise. Was that how he saw me? The woman in the drawing looked composed, resilient, quietly powerful, everything I hoped to be but wasn't sure I'd achieved. My phone chimed with a text message, interrupting my contemplation. Made it home safe. Already missing the ocean. And you? Sleep well, Emma. Talk tomorrow. Daniel's simple message brought a smile to my face. Regardless of what complications awaited us, what obstacles we might face, this connection was real. Worth protecting. Worth fighting for. I typed a response with sleep-heavy fingers. Missing you too. Dream of paradise. Talk tomorrow. As I drifted toward much-needed sleep, I found myself not dreading the challenges ahead, but feeling oddly prepared for them. The woman in Daniel's sketch, serene, strong, resilient, wasn't an idealized version of me. She was who I'd become during our time in paradise, who I intended to remain, whatever came next. My fiancé had left me at the altar, yes, but in doing so, he'd inadvertently set me on a path to discover my own strength, my own worth independent of his validation. And most unexpectedly, he'd led me to his brother, a man whose quiet depth and genuine care had begun healing wounds I'd thought would scar me forever. It wasn't the honeymoon I'd planned. It wasn't the future I'd envisioned. It was something unscripted, unexpected, and potentially far more authentic than what I'd lost. And as sleep finally claimed me, my last conscious thought was not of revenge or closure or even healing, but of possibility, of all the unwritten chapters that still awaited us, beyond paradise, in the complicated, beautiful reality of the life we were choosing to explore together. I woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through my childhood bedroom window, momentarily disoriented by the absence of ocean sounds and the gentle sway of our overwater villa. For a split second, panic seized me. Where was I? Then reality flooded back. Home. My parents' house. No longer in paradise with Daniel, but back in the real world where James and all the fallout from his abandonment awaited me. My phone showed 3 missed calls from an unknown number that I strongly suspected was James, plus a good morning text from Daniel that made me smile despite my anxiety. I replied to him quickly, then forced myself out of bed to face whatever this day would bring. There she is. My mother's voice was overly bright as I entered the kitchen, that particular tone she used when trying to mask concern. I've made your favorite breakfast. Blueberry pancakes, extra crispy bacon. Thanks, Mom. I accepted the mug of coffee she pressed into my hands, noting the worried glances my parents exchanged over my head. What? What's happened? My father cleared his throat. James called here this morning. Very early. Something cold settled in my stomach. What did he want? To speak with you, of course. My mother busied herself flipping pancakes. He was insistent. Said he knows you're back from your trip. Did he mention anything about Daniel? I asked carefully. Another look passed between my parents. He did, my father acknowledged. He seemed quite upset about that particular detail. So James knew. The bubble had well and truly burst. Emma, my mother began hesitantly, setting a plate in front of me. About you and Daniel. Can we talk about this after I've eaten? I interrupted, not ready for the inevitable questions. I promise I'll explain everything, but I need coffee first. They respected my request, my father retreating behind his newspaper while my mother made a show of organizing the already immaculate pantry. I ate mechanically, mentally preparing for the conversations ahead, first with my parents, then the much more difficult one with James. I'm going to see him today, I announced after finishing my breakfast. James, we need to have a conversation face-to-face. Are you sure that's wise? My father lowered his newspaper, concern etched across his features. After what he did, I need closure, Dad. And I need to get my things from the apartment. I took a deep breath. I also need to tell you both something about Daniel and me. My mother immediately abandoned her pantry project and sat down, eyes wide with anticipation. We've developed feelings for each other, I said carefully, during the trip. It wasn't planned and it's still very new, but it's real. And we want to explore it. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and something that looked unsettlingly like calculation. My father simply looked thoughtful. Well, my mother said finally, that's unexpected. I know how it sounds, I acknowledged. Believe me, no one is more surprised than I am. But he's nothing like James. And what happened between us happened naturally, respectfully. It wasn't some rebound fling or an act of revenge. Though it had started as exactly that, I admitted silently to myself. A petty act of revenge that had evolved into something genuine and precious. You're both adults, my father said pragmatically. But surely you can see the complications here, Emma. The Sullivan family dynamics alone. I know, I sighed. It's messy. But after everything that's happened, I refuse to walk away from something that feels right just because it might make other people uncomfortable. My mother reached across the table to take my hand. We just want you to be happy, sweetheart. And to be careful. You've been through so much already. I am being careful, I assured her. Daniel and I have talked about this extensively. We're not rushing into anything. Well, I always did prefer Daniel, my father said unexpectedly, returning to his newspaper with a small smile. More reliable. Harold! My mother looked scandalized, though I could see she was fighting a smile of her own. What? It's true. James always had that slick lawyer thing going on. Daniel builds things that last. The simple assessment, so typical of my practical father, lightened the tension considerably. If my parents could at least accept the possibility of Daniel and me together, perhaps the other hurdles wouldn't be insurmountable. Now about seeing James, my mother said, returning to the more immediate concern. Would you like one of us to go with you? Or perhaps Daniel? I shook my head firmly. This is something I need to do alone. It's the only way to truly close that chapter. After breakfast, I called the number that had been trying to reach me, my heart pounding as the phone rang. Emma. James's voice was breathless, as if he'd lunged for the phone. Finally. We need to talk. Yes, we do. I agreed, keeping my tone neutral despite the surge of anger his voice triggered. In person. Today, if possible. Yes, of course. When? Where? I can come to your parents. No. I cut him off sharply. I'll come to the apartment. 2:00. There was a pause as if he was surprised by my directness. 2 is perfect. I'll be waiting. As I ended the call, my hands were shaking, not with fear or longing, but with a strange, electric anticipation. For over 2 weeks, James had been a ghost haunting the periphery of my consciousness. Now I would finally confront him, speak my truth, and walk away on my terms. I spent the morning preparing, mentally and physically. I chose my outfit with deliberate care, a simple, elegant sundress I'd bought in the Maldives, something James had never seen, something that represented the new chapter I was embarking on. I applied light makeup, just enough to ensure I looked healthy and composed. And I wrote down everything I wanted to say, not as a script, but as a reminder of points I didn't want emotion to make me forget. Just before I was due to leave, my phone chimed with a text from Daniel. Thinking of you. Remember your strength. Call me after if you need me. The simple message steadied me. Whatever happened with James, I wasn't alone. I had support, I had a future to look forward to, I had my own inner resources to draw upon. I drove myself to the apartment that had been my home for the past 2 years, the place where James and I had built what I'd thought was a solid foundation for our future. The familiar building looked somehow different now, as if my changed perspective had altered its very appearance. James opened the door before I could even knock, his expression a carefully arranged mask of contrition. He looked good, tanned from his Mexican getaway, dressed in the casual button-down I'd always liked on him, his dark hair slightly longer than before. But he also looked tired, with new lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 3 weeks ago. Emma. My name was a sigh on his lips. Thank you for coming. I moved past him without accepting the embrace he seemed about to offer, taking in the apartment with analytical detachment. Nothing had changed, yet everything felt foreign. The furnishings we'd chosen together, the photos on the walls, the books neatly arranged on shelves, all artifacts from a life that no longer existed. You look amazing, James said, closing the door and turning to face me. The Maldives clearly agreed with you. The subtle barb beneath the compliment didn't escape me. Yes, it did. The trip was exactly what I needed. With my brother. His voice hardened slightly, the mask of contrition slipping to reveal a flash of anger. With Daniel, I confirmed, refusing to be defensive, who was kind enough to ensure the honeymoon package didn't go to waste. James flinched at the deliberate mention of our non-wedding. Emma, about what happened. I need to explain. Please do. I settled onto the sofa, perching on the edge rather than relaxing into it. This wasn't my home anymore. I was merely a visitor. He sat across from me, leaning forward earnestly. I made a terrible mistake. The worst mistake of my life. Walking away from you, from us. I've regretted it every moment since. And yet you managed to make it all the way to Mexico with another woman before this regret overwhelmed you, I observed coolly. His eyes widened slightly, surprise flickering across his features. This new directness wasn't what he'd expected from me. Sylvia was a complication, he admitted. A distraction. I was confused, Emma. Having doubts about everything, not just us, but my career, my life choices. I thought she represented something I needed, but I was wrong. So incredibly wrong. When did it start? I asked, the question that had been haunting me since Daniel's revelation on our trip. Your affair with her? James looked down, unable to meet my eyes. 3 months ago. But it wasn't serious. It was serious enough for you to leave me at the altar. I interrupted, my voice steady despite the pain his confirmation caused. It was serious enough for you to throw away 5 years together with a 3-word text message. I can't. Sorry, that's all I got, James. After everything we shared. I know, he whispered, genuine anguish in his voice. I know how unforgivable that was. I panicked. I convinced myself you'd be better off without me, that I was doing you a favor by ending it before we made a legally binding commitment. How magnanimous of you, I said, unable to keep the sarcasm from my voice. And what about Sylvia? What happened to your great Mexican escape? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it sent an unexpected pang through me, not of longing, but of the strange grief that comes with recognizing something once loved is now simply a memory. Reality happened, he said bitterly. Once we were actually there, away from the excitement of sneaking around, it became clear we had nothing in common beyond physical attraction. We fought constantly. She left after a week, flew home without me. I stayed another few days, trying to figure out what the hell I'd done to my life. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. And I realized what I'd thrown away. Who I'd thrown away. You, Emma. The best thing that ever happened to me. 3 weeks ago, those words might have moved me, might have been exactly what I desperately wanted to hear. Now they rang hollow, a too-late recognition of what should have been valued all along. Why did you call Daniel? I asked, changing direction. When you couldn't reach me? James's expression darkened. I was worried about you. No one seemed to know where you were. When I finally got back and started trying to make amends, you'd vanished. Even your parents were evasive. Then I heard rumors that Daniel had taken a vacation at the same time. It wasn't hard to put the pieces together. And how did that make you feel? The question was genuine, not therapeutic. I wanted to understand his reaction. Betrayed, he said immediately, anger flashing across his features. My own brother taking my fiancé, ex-fiancé, I corrected sharply. You forfeited any claim to me when you sent that text, James. Semantics? He dismissed with a wave. The point is, he had no right to swoop in the moment things ended between us. It's opportunistic. Predatory, even. That's not what happened, I said firmly. Daniel offered me an escape when I desperately needed one. A chance to heal somewhere beautiful instead of hiding in my childhood bedroom while everyone whispered about poor, abandoned Emma. And seduced you in the process, James accused bitterly. I laughed then, the sound surprising both of us. Is that what you think happened? That's rich coming from the man who was sleeping with his co-worker for 3 months while planning our wedding. That was different. Yes, it was, I agreed, cutting him off. What happened between Daniel and me developed naturally, honestly, from mutual respect and genuine connection. Nothing was hidden, nothing was betrayed. We were both completely free to explore our feelings. Feelings, James repeated, his expression hardening. So it is like that. You and my brother. It's new, I said cautiously, not wanting to give him more information than necessary, but refusing to lie. We're taking things slowly. But yes, there are feelings involved. He stood abruptly, pacing the living room with agitated energy. This is insane, Emma. You can't seriously be considering a relationship with Daniel. He's my brother, my family. Do you have any idea how uncomfortable this will make everything? Holidays, family gatherings, our mutual friends. I don't think you're in any position to lecture me about making things uncomfortable, I replied evenly. And frankly, those concerns are secondary to how Daniel and I feel about each other. James stopped pacing, studying me with newfound wariness. You've changed. Yes, I acknowledged simply. I have. Is this about hurting me? Getting back at me for what I did? Because if it is, it's working. His voice cracked slightly. The thought of you with Daniel? It's killing me, Emma. For a moment, I considered his question seriously. Was there still an element of revenge in my feelings for Daniel? A small, lingering satisfaction in knowing my relationship with his brother hurt James the way he had hurt me. "This isn't about you," I said finally, the truth crystallizing as I spoke it. "Not anymore. What happened in the Maldives happened because Daniel and I connected as two individuals with genuine compatibility. Your absence from my life just created the space for me to see him clearly for the first time." James sank back into his chair, his expression defeated. "So that's it? 5 years together and you're just done? Moving on with my brother?" "You ended those 5 years, James. Not me." I kept my voice gentle but firm. "You made your choice when you left me on what was supposed to be our wedding day. I'm simply making mine now." We sat in silence for a long moment, the finality of the situation settling around us like dust after an implosion. Whatever James had hoped to accomplish with this meeting, reconciliation, forgiveness, absolution, it clearly wasn't happening. "I still love you," he said finally, his voice small. "I made a horrible mistake, but my feelings never changed." "I believe that you think that's true," I replied carefully. "But love isn't just a feeling, James. It's actions, choices, commitments. And your actions spoke much louder than these words you're saying now." He flinched as if I'd slapped him but didn't argue. Perhaps on some level he recognized the truth in what I was saying. "I came here for 2 reasons. I continued when he remained silent. To get the closure we both need and to collect my things. I'd appreciate your help with the latter so I can move forward with my life." "You're really not coming back?" he murmured, more statement than question. "No, I'm not." He nodded slowly, resignation replacing the hope he'd clearly been harboring. "I'll help you pack." The next hour passed in strained efficiency as we sorted through the shared accumulation of our life together. Clothes, books, personal mementos, each item a decision, a small severance of the ties that had bound us. James was surprisingly accommodating, even offering items that were technically his, but that he knew I'd valued. "The kitchen stuff should stay with you," I said pragmatically. "You'll need it more than I will at my parents'." "Where will you go?" he asked, sealing a box of my books. "After your parents, I mean. Will you look for your own place?" I nodded. "Eventually. I need to sort out my work situation first, establish a more consistent income." "You could take over my lease here," he offered. "I've been thinking of moving anyway after everything." The suggestion took me by surprise. "I'll consider it," I said, though I knew I wouldn't. This space held too many memories, too much of our shared past. Whatever came next needed to be completely my own. As we finished loading the last of my boxes into my car, an awkward moment descended. What was the appropriate farewell for this situation? A handshake seemed absurdly formal after 5 years together, but embracing felt wrong given everything that had transpired. "I am sorry, Emma," James said quietly, "more than I can adequately express. I know it doesn't change anything, but I need you to know that." I studied his face. The familiar features I'd once loved so deeply, now viewed through the lens of betrayal and newfound clarity. There was genuine remorse there, I believed. But also a self-centeredness that I recognized now had always been present, had always shaped his decisions and actions. "I accept your apology," I said finally. "And I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for, James." "I really do," he nodded, blinking rapidly against unexpected tears. "And you and Daniel? Are you happy? Truly?" The question seemed genuine, a momentary elevation above his own hurt to concern for mine. "We're figuring it out," I replied honestly. "But yes, I think we could be very happy." "Then I'll try to make peace with it," he said, though his expression suggested that would be a long process. "For all our sakes." I got into my car without looking back, aware that I was closing a significant chapter of my life with this departure. 5 years of memories, of shared dreams, of what I'd thought was my future, all relegated to the past in the space of 3 weeks. As I drove away, I felt a curious lightness spreading through me. Not happiness exactly, but liberation. Freedom from the weight of betrayal, from the need for answers or explanations, from the limbo of uncertainty. Whatever came next would be my choice, my path, unburdened by the shadow of what James had done. I didn't go directly to my parents' house. Instead, I found myself driving to the small park near our old university campus, a place I'd always gone to think when life felt overwhelming. I parked and walked to my favorite bench overlooking the duck pond, breathing in the familiar scents of grass and water, and remembering a younger version of myself who had sat in this very spot, dreaming of the future. That's where I called Daniel from, my heart full of contradictory emotions: relief, sadness, excitement, trepidation. How did it go? He asked immediately upon answering. It's done, I said simply. Completely done. Are you okay? The concern in his voice warmed me. I am, I realized, somewhat surprised by the truth of it. I really am. We talked, I got my things, and now I'm sitting in Mayfield Park watching ducks and feeling free. Free is good, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Very good. He knows about us, I added, not wanting to hide this crucial detail. And he's not happy, obviously, but I think he'll eventually accept it. That's more than I expected, Daniel admitted, though it doesn't change anything for me. For us. No, I agreed. It doesn't. A comfortable silence stretched between us, the kind only possible with someone who understands that not every moment needs words to fill it. I miss you, I said finally. Is that crazy? It's only been a day. If it's crazy, then I'm crazy too, he replied softly. When can I see you? Tomorrow, I suggested. Dinner like we planned? A proper first date? Tomorrow can't come soon enough. Where should I pick you up? My parents, I decided. I think it's important that we're open from the start. No sneaking around, no hiding. I agree completely, he said, relief evident in his voice. 7 o'clock? Perfect. After ending the call, I sat a while longer, watching the ducks glide serenely across the pond's surface, marveling at how much had changed in such a short time. 3 weeks ago, I'd been preparing to become Mrs. James Sullivan, building my future around his career, his plans, his vision of our life together. Now I was single, living with my parents, and embarking on a new relationship with his brother. Life was strange indeed, but as I finally stood to leave, I realized I wasn't mourning the future I'd lost. I was genuinely excited about the one taking shape before me, undefined, unplanned, but somehow feeling more authentically mine than the path I'd been on with James. Back at my parents' house, I enlisted their help bringing in my boxes, deflecting their careful questions about my meeting with James with simple, factual answers. Yes, we'd talked. Yes, it was definitively over. Yes, I'd gotten all my things. No, it hadn't been easy, but it had been necessary. And you're still planning to see Daniel? My mother asked as we sorted through my possessions in the garage, deciding what would go into storage and what I needed immediate access to. Yes, I said firmly. He's picking me up tomorrow night for dinner. She nodded, her expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. It won't be simple, Emma. People will talk. The Sullivan family will have opinions. Your mutual friends will feel they have to choose sides. I know, I sighed, collapsing onto a storage tub. Believe me, I've thought about all of that. But I can't let other people's potential discomfort dictate my choices. Not anymore. Good, she said with unexpected firmness. That's exactly the right attitude. I looked up in surprise. You approve? Of you prioritizing your own happiness? Absolutely. She sat beside me, taking my hand in hers. Emma, watching you these past years with James, you became smaller, less yourself. You accommodated his ambitions, his preferences, his needs, while yours became secondary. I didn't say anything because you seemed happy enough, and that's what mothers do. We support our children's choices even when we have reservations. You didn't like James? This was news to me. She'd always been unfailingly warm toward him. I liked him fine, she clarified, but I never thought he appreciated the full measure of who you are. You're creative, passionate, intuitive, all qualities that seem to matter little in the life you were building with him. Her assessment was uncomfortably accurate. I had diminished parts of myself to fit into the space James had allotted for me in his life, taking freelance design work that was beneath my abilities but convenient for our schedule, deferring my own creative projects to support his career advancement, adapting my tastes and preferences to align with his. Daniel's different, I said softly. She smiled knowingly. I could see that from the moment you came home from your trip. You're standing taller. Speaking more directly, the Emma who left for the Maldives was shattered. The one who returned is healing, yes, but also expanded somehow. More fully herself. Her perception brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I feel more like myself, I admitted. With Daniel, there's space to be all of me. He sees me, really sees me. Then that's what matters, my mother said simply. The rest, the gossip, the family complications, all of that is secondary, navigable. Her support meant more than I could express, a foundation of certainty beneath the uncertain path ahead. Whatever challenges arose from my relationship with Daniel, I wouldn't face them alone. That night, as I unpacked the few boxes I'd brought inside, I came across Daniel's sketchbook. the visual diary of our time in the Maldives that he'd gifted me our final night there. I sat cross-legged on my childhood bed, slowly turning pages, each drawing transporting me back to paradise and the gradual transformation that had occurred there. The final sketch was one I hadn't noticed before, a simple rendering of two hands intertwined, recognizably his and mine from a small scar on my thumb I'd gotten years ago opening a can of paint. Beneath it, in his precise architect's handwriting, were the words, "Whatever comes next." I traced the lines with my fingertip, smiling at the perfect simplicity of the message. Whatever came next, we would face it together, hands linked, moving forward step by step. For the first time since James's abandonment, I fell asleep not with thoughts of what I'd lost, but with eager anticipation for what I was finding, a relationship based on mutual respect and genuine connection, a renewed sense of my own worth independent of anyone else's validation, and a future that, while undefined, felt full of possibilities that were authentically mine to explore. "You look beautiful," my mother said from the doorway of my bedroom, watching as I put the finishing touches on my makeup for my first official date with Daniel. "That color suits you." I smoothed the fabric of my emerald green dress, a new purchase I'd made that afternoon during a therapeutic shopping trip. "Thanks. I wanted something different, something that wasn't associated with James or the wedding or any of that. Fresh start." She nodded approvingly. "Good strategy." The doorbell rang and my mother's eyes lit up. "That must be Daniel. Your father's down there. Try not to take too long or he'll start with the interrogation." I laughed, though there was truth in her warning. My father had always liked Daniel, but this new dynamic would inevitably trigger his protective instincts. When I descended the stairs, I found Daniel in the living room, looking slightly nervous but handsome in dark jeans and a blue button-down that brought out his eyes. He was holding a small bouquet of wildflowers and listening politely to my father's not-so-subtle questioning about his intentions. "Emma," he said when he saw me, his expression warming in a way that made my breath catch. "You look incredible." "So do you," I replied, accepting the flowers with a smile. "These are beautiful, thank you. Not traditional roses," he explained, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "I thought maybe we should forge our own traditions." The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched me deeply. "They're perfect." After promising my parents we wouldn't be too late, we escaped to Daniel's car, both exhaling in relief once the door closed behind us. "Well, that wasn't too painful," I joked as he pulled away from the curb. "Your dad asked if my intentions were honorable," Daniel admitted with a sheepish smile. I think he was only half joking. "And are they? Honorable?" I teased, enjoying the slight flush that crept up his neck. "Completely," he assured me, glancing over with such sincerity that my teasing smile softened into something more genuine. "Tonight is about starting fresh. A proper first date, like we talked about." Daniel had made reservations at a small Italian restaurant across town, deliberately chosen for its distance from our usual haunts where we might encounter mutual friends or acquaintances. It was charming and intimate, with candle-lit tables and a quiet atmosphere that allowed for easy conversation. Once we were seated, a curious shyness descended between us, as if the reality of being on an actual date, away from the fantasy setting of the Maldives, had suddenly made everything more consequential. "This is silly," I said finally, laughing softly. "We spent 2 weeks together 24/7, and now we're acting like nervous teenagers." Daniel's expression relaxed into a smile. "I know. It's just different here. Real life? Different doesn't have to mean worse," I pointed out, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "Just adjusted." His fingers interlaced with mine naturally, the contact dispelling the last of the awkwardness. "You're right. So, how was your day? Besides the emotional roller coaster of seeing James and clearing out your things." And just like that, we fell into the easy rapport we'd developed in the Maldives, talking about everything and nothing, laughing at shared observations, listening attentively to each other's thoughts. I told him about my shopping trip, about my mother's surprising insights, about my tentative plans to revamp my design portfolio and seek more fulfilling work. "I've been thinking about that, actually," Daniel said as we shared a tiramisu for dessert. "The design work you did for my architectural portfolio last year. Would you be interested in doing more projects like that? Because I have several clients who need similar visualization work, and I've never found anyone who captures the essence of the designs as well as you did." The offer caught me by surprise. "Are you serious?" "Completely," he assured me. This isn't charity or nepotism, Emma. Your work sold my designs better than anything I could have created. It would be a professional collaboration, proper contracts, fair compensation. I considered the prospect, excitement building at the thought of applying my design skills to meaningful projects rather than the corporate brochures and wedding invitations that had been my bread and butter. I'd like that, I said finally. Very much? Great, he smiled. We can discuss details later, but I have at least 3 projects that could use your touch right away if you're interested. I am, I confirmed, warmed by his belief in my abilities. James had always been supportive of my design work in theory, but he'd never actively sought to integrate it with his own professional life, never saw it as something that could complement his career rather than simply accommodate it. After dinner, neither of us ready for the evening to end, we went for a walk in the nearby sculpture garden, the art installations dramatically lit against the night sky. As we strolled hand in hand among the massive metal structures, conversation turned to the inevitable complications awaiting us. My parents invited us for dinner next Sunday, Daniel said carefully. They want to see us both to talk about everything. I tensed slightly. Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan had always been kind to me, welcoming me into their family with genuine warmth. But this situation, their younger son's fiancé now dating their older son after being left at the altar, was beyond the scope of normal family drama. How do you think they'll react? I asked. Daniel squeezed my hand reassuringly. They were furious with James when they found out what he did. Absolutely livid. My father actually flew to Mexico to try to find him and drag him back. He shook his head at the memory. They adore you, Emma. Their concern will be for both of us, making sure we're not just reacting to James's actions, that this is genuine. And how do we convince them of that? By being honest, he said simply. About how things developed in the Maldives, about how we're proceeding cautiously but with genuine feelings for each other. They'll see the truth in how we are together. His confidence reassured me somewhat, though I still dreaded the inevitable scrutiny and questioned intentions from others less invested in our happiness than his parents. And what about our friends? I asked. People will take sides. Some will, he acknowledged. Others will surprise us. I actually had a call from Mike today. Mike had been one of James's groomsmen, a college friend who'd remained close through the years. What did he say? He wanted to check if the rumors were true, about us being in the Maldives together. I told him yes. Daniel looked slightly uncomfortable. He was supportive, actually. Said James had confided in him about Sylvia months ago, and he'd tried to talk him out of both the affair and leaving you. He feels partly responsible for not doing more to stop it. This revelation stung, another person who had known about James's betrayal before I did, but I pushed past the hurt to focus on the surprising support. So not everyone will condemn us. No, Daniel agreed. Those who truly care about our happiness won't. The rest, well, their opinions matter less than they used to, don't they? I nodded, realizing the truth in his assessment. My perspectives had shifted dramatically in the past 3 weeks. The desperate need for social approval, for maintaining appearances that had been so central to my life with James, now seemed less relevant, less worthy of dictating my choices. I guess that's part of growing up, I mused as we completed our circuit of the garden and returned to his car, realizing that other people's opinions are just that, opinions. Not facts, not rules, not limitations on your own happiness. Daniel smiled, opening the passenger door for me. Exactly. And for what it's worth, I think you're handling all of this with remarkable grace and clarity. The drive back to my parents' house felt too short, neither of us quite ready to end our first official date. When Daniel pulled into the driveway, he turned off the engine and turned to face me. I had a wonderful time tonight, he said softly. So did I replied, meaning it completely. Despite the background complications, despite the lingering echoes of James's betrayal, being with Daniel felt right in a way I couldn't fully articulate. Easy, but not in the sense of lacking depth, rather naturally aligned, like two puzzle pieces designed to fit perfectly. "May I kiss you goodnight?" he asked, the formal request making me smile. In answer, I leaned across the console, meeting his lips with mine in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened, his hand coming up to cup my cheek as mine found the solid warmth of his shoulder. When we finally parted, both slightly breathless, the connection between us felt palpable, a tangible current of attraction and affection. "I should go in," I murmured reluctantly, "before my father starts flashing the porch lights like I'm 16. Daniel laughed, pressing one more quick kiss to my lips before releasing me. I'll call you tomorrow? Maybe we could look at those design projects I mentioned. I'd like that, I said, gathering my purse. Thank you for tonight, Daniel. For everything? Thank you for taking a chance on this. On us. His expression grew serious. I know it's not simple, Emma, but I truly believe it's worth it. So do I replied, and in that moment, I knew it was absolutely true. Inside, I found my mother pretending to read in the living room, obviously waiting up for me despite the relatively early hour. Her attempt at casualness would have been comical if it weren't so transparent. Good date? She asked, trying to sound merely conversational. Very good, I confirmed, kicking off my heels and curling up in the adjacent armchair. Daniel's parents have invited us for dinner on Sunday. To talk about everything. She set down her book, abandoning the pretense of disinterest. How do you feel about that? Nervous, I admitted, but also ready to be open about us. Hiding or postponing the inevitable won't make it any easier. No, it won't, she agreed. Just remember that you don't owe anyone explanations, Emma. Not even his parents. Your happiness is not contingent on their approval. Her fierce support brought a lump to my throat. Thanks, Mom. I needed to hear that. Now, she said, leaning forward with obvious curiosity, tell me about this date. Was it awkward? Romantic? Did he bring flowers? Where did he take you? I laughed at her eagerness, the tension of the day finally breaking. Yes to the flowers, no to awkwardness, and very much yes to romance. He took me to that little Italian place on Harborview, away from our usual spots. As I recounted the evening, my mother's obvious happiness for me soothed some of the lingering anxiety about the road ahead. Yes, there would be challenges, uncomfortable conversations, people who couldn't or wouldn't understand the complexity of what had happened. But there would also be support, unexpected allies, and most importantly, the growing certainty that what Daniel and I were building was worth whatever difficulty came with it. Later, as I prepared for bed, my phone chimed with a text message. Thank you for tonight. Sleep well, beautiful Emma. Dream of possibilities. I smiled, typing back, every possibility includes you. Good night, Daniel. As I drifted towards sleep, I realized the day had been a significant milestone in my recovery, confronting James, reclaiming my possessions, experiencing my first real date with Daniel outside the fantasy setting of the Maldives. Small steps, perhaps, in the grand scheme of life, but meaningful ones. Steps away from betrayal and humiliation, toward something new and promising. Whatever came next, I was facing it clear-eyed and open-hearted, no longer defined by what had been done to me, but by the choices I was making for myself. And that, perhaps, was the greatest healing of all. The dinner with Daniel's parents loomed like an approaching storm front, necessary but potentially destructive, with outcomes impossible to predict. I spent the intervening days alternating between nervous anticipation and determined preparation, mentally rehearsing answers to likely questions while trying not to overthink the entire situation. Daniel and I saw each other every day that week, sometimes briefly for coffee, sometimes for longer periods working on the design projects he'd mentioned. True to his word, the work was stimulating and fairly compensated, requiring me to stretch my creative abilities in ways my previous freelance jobs never had. The professional collaboration added an unexpected dimension to our evolving relationship, mutual respect for each other's skills, and a natural complementary workflow that felt both productive and satisfying. You're bringing these concepts to life better than I imagined, Daniel said on Friday afternoon as we reviewed my visualizations for a sustainable housing development he'd designed. The way you've captured the interplay of natural light throughout the day. It's exactly what I was trying to convey but couldn't quite articulate. His genuine appreciation for my work warmed me deeply. It helps that your designs are so thoughtful. The architecture speaks for itself. I'm just translating it visually. Don't undervalue your contribution, he said seriously. This partnership works because we each bring something unique to the table. Partnership. The word lingered between us, loaded with meaning beyond the professional context. Were we partners now, in the broader sense? The line between our personal and professional relationships was becoming pleasantly blurred, each sphere enhancing rather than complicating the other. Sunday arrived with perfect autumn weather, crisp, clear, with maple trees blazing in red and gold against a cerulean sky. I chose my outfit carefully, opting for a simple navy dress that was respectful but not overly formal, paired with a cardigan my mother had deemed approachable. My hands trembled slightly as I fastened small pearl earrings, a gift from Daniel's parents for my birthday the previous year, when I'd been firmly established as their future daughter-in-law, not as their elder son's controversial new girlfriend. "You look lovely," my father said when I came downstairs. "And nervous." "Stop that." I laughed despite my anxiety. "Easy for you to say. You're not about to face the parents of the man who left you at the altar while dating his brother." "No." He agreed with a small smile. "Can't say I've had that particular experience. But I've faced my share of difficult conversations, Emma. Just remember, you have nothing to apologize for." "Nothing." His certainty bolstered my courage. By the time Daniel arrived to pick me up, I'd managed to achieve a veneer of calm that wasn't entirely false. His reassuring smile when he saw me helped solidify the fragile confidence. "Ready for this?" he asked as we drove toward his parents' suburban home. "As I'll ever be," I replied, smoothing imaginary wrinkles from my dress. "I keep reminding myself that your parents have always been kind to me. They're reasonable people." "They are," he confirmed. "And they care about both of us." "This won't be an inquisition, Emma. Just a conversation." The Sullivan family home was a handsome colonial where both Daniel and James had grown up, set back from the street on a spacious lot with mature trees now shedding their colorful leaves across the manicured lawn. I'd been here countless times over the past 5 years, holiday gatherings, summer barbecues, wedding planning sessions with Mrs. Sullivan. But now I approached as someone different, my relationship to this place and these people fundamentally altered by circumstances none of us could have predicted. Daniel's mother opened the door before we could ring the bell, her expression a careful neutral that didn't quite hide her emotional turmoil. Elizabeth Sullivan was a tall, elegant woman in her early 60s, with the same dark hair as her son's now elegantly streaked with silver. "Emma, darling," she said, pulling me into a cautious embrace. "It's so good to see you." "You too, Mrs. Sullivan," I replied, returning the hug with genuine affection despite my nervousness. "Mom?" Daniel said, kissing her cheek after I stepped back. "Thanks for doing this." She patted his face in a maternal gesture. "Of course. We need to talk as a family." The word family hung in the air, its meaning now complicated by the reshuffled relationships between us all. Mr. Sullivan was waiting in the living room, rising from his armchair when we entered. Robert Sullivan had the same build as Daniel, tall and broad-shouldered, though his hair had gone completely silver. His handshake was firm, his blue eyes searching as they moved between Daniel and me. "Emma," he said warmly, "you're looking well." "Thank you, Mr. Sullivan." "Drinks before dinner?" Mrs. Sullivan suggested, gesturing to the bar cart. "I think we could all use one." The suggestion was met with unanimous agreement. As Mr. Sullivan mixed gin and tonics, an awkward silence descended, no one quite sure how to begin the conversation we'd all gathered to have. "So, Mrs. Sullivan said finally, accepting her drink, "I think we should address the elephant in the room directly. Daniel has told us about the development between you two." I took a fortifying sip of my drink, grateful for its bracing tartness. "Yes, I imagine it came as quite a shock." "To put it mildly," Mr. Sullivan agreed, his tone dry but not unkind. "Though no more shocking than what James did, I suppose." At the mention of their younger son, Mrs. Sullivan's expression tightened. "We've spoken with James as well," she said. "He's very upset about the situation." Daniel's posture stiffened beside me. "I'm sure he is. But his feelings in this matter aren't the priority." "No," his father agreed firmly. "They're not. Not after what he did." He turned to me, his expression softening. "Emma, first and foremost, we want you to know how deeply sorry we are for James's actions. His behavior was reprehensible, and we've made our disappointment abundantly clear to him." "Thank you," I said, genuinely touched by their straightforward acknowledgement. "That means a lot to me." "Now, Mrs. Sullivan continued, her voice measured, "about you and Daniel. We have questions. That's why we're here," Daniel said, reaching for my hand in a gesture of solidarity. "We want to be completely transparent with you." Mrs. Sullivan's eyes tracked the movement, lingering on our intertwined fingers. "When did this start exactly?" Daniel and I exchanged glances, silently deciding who should answer. "It developed gradually during our time in the Maldives," I said carefully. "It wasn't planned or expected. It just happened." "But nothing occurred before James ended the engagement?" Mr. Sullivan pressed, his tone making it clear how important this distinction was to him. "Absolutely nothing," Daniel stated emphatically. I would never have acted on any feelings while Emma was with James. Never. The implication that he'd had feelings before wasn't lost on his parents, their expressions registering surprise. You had feelings for Emma prior to all this? Mrs. Sullivan asked delicately. Daniel hesitated, then nodded. I cared for Emma from the moment I met her. But once she and James became involved, I respected their relationship completely. Those earlier feelings were irrelevant. This admission clearly startled his parents, recalibrating their understanding of the situation. And you, Emma? Mr. Sullivan turned to me. Were you aware of Daniel's feelings before? No, I said honestly. I had no idea until he told me in the Maldives. Our relationship was always appropriate, friendly, familial, nothing more. Mrs. Sullivan sighed, setting down her glass. I believe you both. I do, but you must understand our concern. This is unprecedented territory for our family. The potential for lasting damage to relationships, for ongoing tensions. We understand, I assured her. Believe me, we've discussed all of this extensively. We're proceeding carefully, with full awareness of the complications. But you are proceeding, Mr. Sullivan observed, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. Yes, Daniel confirmed, his voice steady. Emma and I have genuine feelings for each other. Feelings we believe are worth exploring, despite the unusual circumstances. A moment of silent communication passed between his parents, decades of marriage allowing them to exchange thoughts without words. Well then, Mrs. Sullivan said finally, I suppose our main concern is whether this is truly what both of you want, or if it's a reaction to what James did, a way of processing the hurt. The question cut to the heart of my own occasional doubts, the uncertainty that sometimes crept in during quiet moments. Was what I felt for Daniel genuine, or was it gratitude, relief, a psychological response to trauma? I've asked myself that same question, I admitted. And I can only say that what I feel for Daniel is distinct from my feelings about James's betrayal. It's not about revenge or rebound. It's about discovering a connection with someone who sees me clearly, who values me for exactly who I am. Daniel squeezed my hand, his expression so full of emotion it made my heart ache. And for me, he added quietly, this isn't about competing with James or claiming what was his. It's about finally allowing myself to acknowledge feelings I've respected the boundaries of for years. His parents observed our exchange with thoughtful expressions, something shifting in their demeanor, from cautious concern toward tentative acceptance. You two certainly seem compatible, Mrs. Sullivan observed, more so than I perhaps realized before. That's what James said when he introduced us. Daniel reminded her with a small smile. That we'd hit it off because we had so much in common. He just didn't anticipate how accurate that prediction would prove to be. The gentle joke broke some of the tension, Mr. Sullivan's deep chuckle joined by his wife's softer laugh. Well, she said, standing, I think we should move to dinner. The roast will be perfectly done, and we can continue this conversation more comfortably at the table. The meal that followed was surprisingly pleasant, the initial awkwardness giving way to more natural interactions as we discussed safer topics. Daniel's architectural projects, my design work, mutual acquaintances, community news. By dessert, a delicious apple crumble that had always been my favorite of Mrs. Sullivan's recipes. The atmosphere had warmed considerably. I have something to ask, Mrs. Sullivan said as she served coffee. Something difficult. She looked between us, her expression serious. What happens when you come together for family events? James will always be our son just as Daniel is. We can't simply exclude him from our lives despite our disappointment in his actions. The question hung in the air, unavoidable and complex. Daniel and I had discussed this privately, but reached no definitive conclusion. I think, I began carefully, that will depend on James, at least initially. Whether he can be civil, whether he's willing to acknowledge the situation maturely. I have no desire to create tension at family gatherings, but I also won't pretend that what happened didn't happen. And I won't ask Emma to subject herself to uncomfortable situations for the sake of family harmony, Daniel added firmly. But we're both adults who can behave civilly if James can do the same. Mr. Sullivan nodded thoughtfully. That seems reasonable. Perhaps in time. Well, wounds heal, adaptations are made. Family finds a way? I hope so, I said sincerely. Despite everything, I didn't wish ill for James, nor did I want to be the source of ongoing family discord. As the evening drew to a close, Mrs. Sullivan pulled me aside while Daniel and his father discussed a renovation project in the backyard. Emma, she said quietly, her hands clasping mine. "I need you to know something. We've always thought of you as a daughter. That didn't change when James—" She paused, emotion briefly overwhelming her. "What I'm trying to say is that we still consider you family, regardless of which of our sons you're with. If this relationship with Daniel is what makes you happy, truly happy, then you have our blessing." Tears pricked at my eyes, her acceptance more meaningful than I'd anticipated. "Thank you. That means more to me than I can express." She squeezed my hands before releasing them. "Just promise me one thing." "Anything. Be certain," she said, her eyes searching mine. "Be absolutely certain this is what you want before you go too far down this path. Because the fallout, if it ends badly, it would affect so many people beyond just you and Daniel." The weight of her concern settled on my shoulders, not as a burden but as a necessary reminder of the stakes involved. "I promise," I said solemnly. "We're taking things slowly, being thoughtful. Neither of us wants to cause more pain." She nodded, apparently satisfied with my response. "Good. Now let me send you home with some of that apple crumble. You always did love it, and Daniel can bring back the container next time." The casual assumption of next time, that I would be welcome in this home again, that there would be future visits, lifted my spirits immeasurably. We'd navigated the first major hurdle, and while not everything was resolved, a path forward had begun to clear. As Daniel drove me home, the tension I'd been carrying for days finally released in a long exhale. "That went better than expected," I said, leaning my head back against the seat. "Much better," he agreed, reaching across to take my hand. "I told you they care about you, independent of your relationship with James." "Your mother asked me to be certain," I said after a moment. "About us. About what we're doing." Daniel nodded, not surprised. "She asked me the same thing earlier this week. It's a fair request, given the circumstances." "And what did you tell her?" He glanced over, his expression serious in the dim light of the car. "I told her that I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The simple conviction in his voice quieted any lingering doubts I might have harbored. "I told her we're taking things slowly, being careful. But the truth is, Daniel, I've never felt as seen as I do with you, as valued for exactly who I am." His hand tightened around mine. "That's how it should be, Emma. Always." When we reached my parents' house, neither of us was ready to end the evening, despite the emotional intensity of the past few hours. We sat in his car, talking softly about everything and nothing, reluctant to break the connection that had strengthened through the trial we'd just endured together. "Stay for a while?" I suggested. "My parents won't mind. We could watch a movie, decompress." Daniel agreed readily, and we ended up in my parents' comfortable den, a classic film playing that neither of us paid much attention to, more focused on the comfort of being together, my head on his shoulder, his arm around me, the simple rightness of our physical proximity. It was well past midnight when he finally left, both of us work-bound in the morning but unwilling to part until absolutely necessary. His goodnight kiss lingered, deepened, filled with unspoken promises of what might come when we were both ready to take that next step. "Sweet dreams, Emma," he whispered against my lips. "They will be," I assured him. "They'll be of you." As I prepared for bed, I reflected on the day's events, the dinner, the difficult questions, the unexpected support from Daniel's parents. Another milestone crossed, another step forward in this strange, beautiful journey we'd embarked on. 3 discoveries stood out most clearly. First, that family could be more flexible, more accepting than I'd feared. Second, that Daniel and I were stronger together than apart, each challenge cementing rather than weakening our bond. And third, most surprisingly, that the pain of James's betrayal had receded to a dull ache rather than the sharp agony it had once been. I was healing, moving forward, building something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. Not despite the betrayal, but in some ways because of it, because it had created space for me to discover parts of myself that had been submerged, to recognize a connection that might otherwise have remained unexplored. As I drifted toward sleep, I found myself feeling something unexpected. Gratitude. Not for the humiliation or the pain, certainly, but for where they had ultimately led me, to a more authentic version of myself, and to a relationship that felt more genuine than anything I'd experienced before. Whatever came next, I was facing it with clear eyes and an open heart, no longer defined by what had been done to me, but by my own choices, my own path forward. And that, perhaps, was the most healing realization of all. Life settled into a new pattern over the following weeks, not exactly normal, but a fresh configuration that began to feel natural in its own way. Daniel and I continued seeing each other regularly, our relationship deepening through shared experiences both mundane and meaningful. Movies and takeout on weeknights, professional collaboration on his architectural projects, weekend hikes in the crisp autumn weather, and increasingly honest conversations about our past, present, and potential future. The work situation he had proposed flourished beyond my expectations. What began as visualization projects for his architectural designs expanded to include branding for his firm and direct collaboration with his clients on their marketing materials. For the first time in years, I found myself professionally challenged and creatively fulfilled, using talents that had languished during my years with James. "You should make this official," Daniel suggested one evening as we reviewed a particularly successful project in his home office. "Set up your own design studio, take on clients beyond just my referrals. You're too talented to limit yourself." The suggestion sparked both excitement and anxiety. "That's a big step. Financial risk, inconsistent income, no safety net." "All true," he acknowledged. "But also freedom, creative control, building something that's entirely yours. And I've seen how clients respond to your work, Emma. You wouldn't be starting from zero." His confidence in me was both touching and empowering. Unlike James, who had viewed my freelance work as a convenient supplement to his career plans, Daniel saw my professional potential as something to be cultivated, celebrated, pursued in its own right. "I've been thinking about it," I admitted, "especially if I get my own place soon. I could set up a proper workspace, develop a real portfolio website, do this properly." "Your own place?" Daniel repeated, something flashing briefly in his eyes before he schooled his expression. "You've been looking?" I nodded, aware of the subtle tension my comment had created. "Just preliminarily. As much as I love my parents, I can't live with them forever. I need my own space, my independence." He was quiet for a moment, seemingly absorbed in organizing the project files on his desk. "Of course," he said finally. "That makes perfect sense. What are you thinking?" I asked gently, recognizing the careful neutrality in his tone that usually masked deeper thoughts. Daniel sighed, turning his chair to face me fully. "Honestly, I had a brief, completely irrational moment of wondering if you might consider moving in with me. Which is ridiculous. We've only been dating for 5 weeks, and we agreed to take things slowly. So please ignore that thought entirely." His honesty made me smile. "It's not ridiculous," I assured him. "Just premature, I think. Not because I don't see this going somewhere serious, but because I need to establish myself independently first. After 5 years with James, then moving back with my parents, I need to know I can stand on my own, make my own decisions, create my own space." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Of course you do. That makes perfect sense, Emma. And I want that for you too, whatever helps you rebuild your confidence and independence." His immediate support, without defensiveness or pressure, reinforced my growing certainty that this relationship was fundamentally different from what I'd had with James. There was room for my needs, my growth, my autonomy within the partnership we were building. "For what it's worth," I added, reaching for his hand, "I do see us there eventually. Living together, I mean. When we're both ready." His smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. "I do too. And I can wait. We have time." That conversation marked another milestone in our evolving relationship. The first tentative discussion of a long-term future together, acknowledgement of the direction we were moving without rushing the journey. It felt right, balanced, a natural progression rather than a desperate grasp for security or validation. My search for an apartment took on new energy after that discussion. With Daniel's encouragement, I focused on spaces that could accommodate both living and working needs. Places with good natural light for photography, room for a proper desk setup, perhaps even a small meeting area for potential clients. 2 weeks later, I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment in an artsy neighborhood about equidistant between my parents' home and Daniel's place. It was on the 2nd floor of a converted warehouse building, with exposed brick walls, tall windows, and an open floor plan that could easily be configured as both living space and home studio. "It's perfect," Daniel declared when I gave him the first tour. "Still empty but full of potential. I can already see it. Desk by those windows, portfolio samples mounted on that wall, comfortable client seating area there." His enthusiasm matched my own, his architect's eye immediately grasping the possibilities I'd recognized. We spent that afternoon measuring spaces, discussing furniture placement, planning the optimal setup for both living and working. "I have something for you," he said as we sat on the floor of my empty apartment, sharing takeout Chinese food on a makeshift picnic. A housewarming gift of sorts. From his messenger bag, he produced a flat package wrapped in simple brown paper. I opened it carefully to find a framed sketch, a beautiful rendering of the view from my new apartment windows, capturing the city skyline as seen through the industrial-style panes. "Daniel," I breathed, taking in the detail and care evident in every line. "It's beautiful. When did you even have time to do this?" "When we first looked at the place," he admitted with a smile. "While you were talking to the landlord about lease terms, I was memorizing the view. I wanted you to have something special for your first night here, a reminder that this new beginning is worth celebrating." I leaned across our improvised picnic to kiss him, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "It's perfect. And it's going right there." I pointed to a prominent wall space visible from both the living area and what would become my workspace, where I can see it every day. Moving day arrived with surprising efficiency, thanks to the combined efforts of my parents, Daniel, and a few close friends who'd remained supportive throughout the tumultuous changes in my life. By evening, my new apartment had transformed from empty potential to the beginnings of home. Furniture arranged, kitchen basics unpacked, bed assembled and made with fresh linens. "I think that's everything essential," my mother declared, surveying the organized chaos with satisfaction. "The rest can wait until tomorrow." After thanking everyone for their help and seeing my parents off with promises to call once I was settled, I found myself alone with Daniel in my new space. The silence after the busy activity of the day was peaceful rather than empty, full of possibility and new beginnings. "How does it feel?" he asked, coming to stand behind me as I gazed out the windows at the city lights beginning to sparkle in the early evening darkness. "Being in your own place again?" "Good," I said, leaning back against him as his arms circled my waist. "Like another piece falling into place." Another step forward. His chin rested on top of my head, our reflections visible in the window glass, a couple standing together, solid and connected, framed by the beautiful space that was now mine. "Stay tonight?" I asked softly, the question hanging between us with all its implications. We'd been taking the physical aspect of our relationship slowly, respecting the emotional complexity of our situation with careful restraint. But now, in this new space that was entirely my own, untainted by past associations or familial oversight, I felt ready for this next step. Daniel's arms tightened slightly around me, his reflection in the glass showing the careful consideration in his expression. "Are you sure?" I turned in his embrace to face him directly. "I am. This feels right, Daniel. Here now with you." The kiss that followed was different from those we'd shared before, deeper, more purposeful, containing both question and answer. His hands framed my face with gentle reverence, as if I were something precious he feared might break. "I love you, Emma," he said softly, the words spoken against my lips. "I think I've loved you for a very long time." The declaration should have frightened me, coming so soon after the collapse of what I'd thought was my life's great love story. Instead, it felt like a confirmation of something I'd already known, a truth settling into place with quiet certainty. "I love you too," I replied, the words emerging from a place of calm conviction rather than desperate need or fleeting emotion. "Not because you rescued me, or because I'm grateful, or because of anything to do with James. I love you for who you are, Daniel, for how you see me. For the partnership we're building together." His smile was luminous, joy lighting his features as he pulled me closer. "That's all I've ever wanted. For you to see me separate from him. For this to be about us, just us." "It is," I assured him, rising on tiptoe to recapture his lips. "Just us." What followed was a slow, deliberate exploration, tender but not hesitant, passionate but not rushed. We moved to my newly assembled bed, the sheets still crisp and scented with the laundry detergent my mother had always used, creating a curious blend of familiarity and newness as Daniel and I discovered each other in this most intimate way. Every touch, every kiss felt like communication, an exchange of promises and revelations. Where James had always approached intimacy with a certain performance quality, Daniel was authentically present, responsive to every subtle cue, generous in ways that spoke of care rather than conquest. Afterward, lying in his arms as moonlight spilled through the undraped windows, I felt a profound sense of rightness wash over me. Not the desperate euphoria that often accompanies new love, but something deeper, more grounded, a certainty that this connection was built on solid foundation, able to withstand whatever challenges might come. "What are you thinking?" Daniel asked softly, his fingers tracing gentle patterns on my bare shoulder. "That I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," I answered truthfully. "That everything, even the painful parts, led me here." "Led us here?" He pressed a kiss to my forehead, understanding without need for further explanation. We fell asleep tangled together, the first night in my new space becoming a beginning rather than merely a transition, a statement rather than a question. Morning brought golden sunlight streaming through the tall windows, illuminating Daniel as he slept beside me. I studied him in the gentle light, the strong lines of his face relaxed in sleep, the dark hair tousled against the pillow, the solid breadth of his shoulders. So similar to his brother in some physical aspects, yet fundamentally different in all the ways that truly mattered. As if sensing my gaze, his eyes opened, focusing on me with immediate warmth. "Good morning," he murmured, voice husky with sleep. "Good morning," I replied, leaning in to kiss him softly. "Coffee? Perfect." We moved around my kitchen together, establishing a new morning rhythm as we prepared breakfast from the limited supplies I'd managed to stock before moving in. Simple tasks, grinding coffee beans, toasting bread, scrambling eggs, became intimate in their domesticity, a glimpse of what sharing a life might eventually entail. "I have to meet a client at 11, Daniel said reluctantly as we finished eating. "Otherwise I'd stay and help you unpack." "Go," I urged, understanding completely. "I have plenty to keep me busy here, and my mother's coming back later to help organize the kitchen properly." He kissed me goodbye at the door, the casual affection already feeling natural rather than novel. "Dinner tonight? I could bring something over, help you tackle more unpacking." "Perfect," I agreed. "Text me when you're done with your client." After he left, I stood in the center of my new apartment, taking in the space that was entirely mine. The boxes waiting to be unpacked, the potential of the empty walls, the promise of the workspace I would create. For the first time in months, I felt completely centered, grounded in a life that was taking shape according to my own design, rather than adapting to someone else's blueprint. The day passed in productive activity, unpacking books and arranging them on shelves, hanging clothes in the closet, setting up my workspace with the desk Daniel had helped me select. My mother arrived mid-afternoon with additional kitchen supplies and decorative touches she'd kept back from my apartment with James, things that were meaningfully mine rather than shared possessions. "This place suits you," she observed as we arranged a collection of framed photographs on a floating shelf. "It has good energy." "Creative energy? It feels right," I agreed, stepping back to assess our arrangement. "Like a fresh slate." "And Daniel?" she asked carefully. "How does he fit into this fresh slate?" I smiled, appreciating her direct approach. "Perfectly. But as a partner, not as the blueprint. Does that make sense?" "More sense than you might realize," she replied with a knowing smile. "That's how it should be, Emma. Two whole people choosing each other, not completing each other. It took your father and me some time to learn that lesson." Her wisdom resonated deeply, articulating something I'd felt but hadn't fully conceptualized. My relationship with James had often cast me in a supporting role to his leading man, the accommodating girlfriend, then fiancé, adapting to his plans, his schedule, his vision of our shared future. With Daniel, I was co-creating something different, a partnership of equals, each with our own pursuits and strengths, choosing to build something together rather than one subsuming the other. "I think I'm falling in love with him," I admitted, though the truth was I had already fallen, had acknowledged as much to Daniel the night before. "Actually, I know I am." My mother's expression was thoughtful rather than surprised. "I suspected as much. It's in the way you look at each other, not with that desperate intensity you and James had, but with something steadier, more grounded." "Exactly," I said, relieved that she understood. "It doesn't feel like infatuation or rebound or any of the things people might assume. It feels right. Solid." She squeezed my hand affectionately. "Then trust that feeling, Emma. And don't let anyone else's opinions or timelines dictate your choices." By the time Daniel returned that evening, bearing Italian food and a bottle of wine, my apartment had transformed from a collection of boxes to the beginnings of a true home. We ate at my small dining table, properly set with dishes unpacked from their newspaper wrappings, candles casting a warm glow over the simple meal. "To new beginnings," Daniel proposed, raising his wine glass in a toast. "And to you, Emma, for your courage, your resilience, and your extraordinary heart." I clinked my glass against his, emotions swelling in my chest. "And to us," I added softly, "for finding each other, even through the most unlikely circumstances." After dinner, as we settled on my new sofa with the remainder of the wine, a notification on my phone broke the comfortable atmosphere, a social media alert I'd been dreading but expecting. "James just made it Instagram official with someone new," I said, scanning the post that had triggered the alert. "Her name's Megan. She's a paralegal at his firm." Daniel tensed beside me. "Are you okay?" I considered the question seriously, searching my emotions for any hint of jealousy or hurt. To my mild surprise, I found only a distant curiosity, a detached interest akin to hearing news about an old acquaintance rather than a former fiancé. "I'm fine," I said, realizing the truth of it as I spoke. "Actually, I'm glad for him. I hope she makes him happy in ways I couldn't." Daniel studied my face, seemingly looking for signs of hidden distress. "You really mean that, don't you?" "I do," I confirmed, setting my phone aside. Whatever anger I had toward James, it's mostly faded. What happened was painful, humiliating, life-altering. But it also led me here, to this apartment, to this independent version of myself, to you. So in a strange way, I'm grateful. He pulled me closer, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Your capacity for growth continually amazes me, Emma. Not many people could find that perspective after what you've been through. It helps that what I've found is so much better than what I lost," I said simply, settling against him with a contented sigh. As we sat together in the quiet of my new home, I realized just how true that statement was. The Emma who had been preparing to marry James 3 months ago seemed like a different person now, less confident in some ways, but more authentic, less certain of specific outcomes, but more trusting in her ability to navigate whatever came. And the relationship I was building with Daniel felt fundamentally different, not a desperate joining of incomplete halves seeking wholeness through union, but a deliberate partnership of two complete individuals choosing to build something together. The night James had abandoned me at the altar had seemed like an ending, the collapse of everything I'd planned, everything I'd built my future around. But sitting there in my new apartment, with Daniel's steady presence beside me and the beginnings of a new life taking shape around us, I recognized it for what it truly was. A beginning, painful, unexpected, unwanted at the time, but a beginning nonetheless. My fiancé had indeed left me at the altar. I had gone on our honeymoon with his brother. But what had started as an act of defiance, of desperate escape, had evolved into something I never could have anticipated, a journey of self-discovery, of healing, and ultimately of finding a love more genuine than anything I'd experienced before. Whatever came next, and I had no doubt there would be more challenges, more uncomfortable encounters, more moments of explaining our unusual beginning to curious observers, we would face it together. Not as the abandoned bride and the supportive almost brother-in-law, but as Emma and Daniel, a partnership forged in unusual circumstances but strengthened by every test we'd faced. "I love you," I said softly, the words still new enough to feel meaningful each time they were spoken. "I love you too," he replied without hesitation, his arm tightening around me. More than I ever thought possible. Outside my apartment windows, the city sparkled with countless lights, each representing lives and stories as complex and unpredictable as my own. Within these walls, a new chapter was beginning, one written in my own hand rather than dictated by circumstance or others' expectations. It wasn't the future I had planned. It was better, more authentic, more balanced, more completely mine. And as I nestled closer to Daniel, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my ear, I felt a profound gratitude for the painful path that had led me here, to this moment, this man, this life that was finally, genuinely my own.